Grim, need you to put effective fire on top of the mountains now. We're no longer on top of the mountain. Got troops down, possible KIA, need fire on tops now, is effectively what he says in that radio transmission. And we think when he says possible KIA, we think he's talking about Roberts.
Right.
We don't realize that one of the assaulters is now separated from the rest of the team and so forth. So Chappie at this point is kind of underneath the foliage of the bonsai tree.
Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Dispatch. We have a really good guest in today for you guys. It's going to be a follow-up to the John Chapman episode we had with Lori. But before we get to that, I just want to say really quick, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for tuning in every single week. I know I say this every single time, but we really do appreciate it. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't, hit that subscribe button. It means a lot to us. Check it out. Check us out on all our socials. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all that good stuff, guys. But without further ado, we have retired Command Sergeant Rob Harrison in the building.
Almost. So Chief Master Sergeant.
Chief Master Sergeant?
Yep. Yeah. The Command Sergeant Major goes on the Army side.
Oh, okay.
But
leave it to the coastie to screw up
the Army. No sweat. Sorry about that.
No, please put me in my place, brother.
But it's Chief Master Sergeant. It's kind of funny because the rank structure on the Air Force side almost seems to work backwards compared to how the Navy or the Coasties would do it.
Right.
When you get into your senior NCO ranks, we start with Master Sergeant, and then we go Senior Master Sergeant, and then Chief Master Sergeant.
Love it.
But for Navy, it's Chief, Senior Chief, and Master Chief.
Look at that. Beyond Dispatch, we also educate you.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you coming in, brother. You were a part of that mission of Anaconda, but you played a very critical role. You guys were the eyes in the sky in 2002 in March for, Takur Ghar. Kind of give us an intro about yourself and tell the audience who you are, man.
Yeah. So I'm Rob Harrison. I retired from the Air Force in 2021. I was a Chief Master Sergeant at the time. Back in 2002, I was a young NCO. I was a staff sergeant and had been in theater since October. Most of our aircrew folks would tend to get replaced after about 90 days or so.
Right.
And it had to do with like managing flight hours. If you were flying too much physiologically, the doctors didn't want you to do that sort of thing. Well, my replacement had gotten injured and couldn't make it out at the normal turnover time. And so I got asked to extend. So I ended up doing basically a double rotation. And so I got there in October, was there through the first week of Anaconda, and left, I think it was like the second week in March is when I redeployed and I came back home. What put me there was kind of interesting because what my role was in the Air Force. I was an intelligence specialist. I started out with the RC-135, was stationed in Omaha, did 3.5 years at a unit flying that particular mission. And I had learned, that you could do our job working with special operations. And so that as soon as I had figured that out, I was like, that's where I want to be. That's what I want to do. And so I kind of charted that path and figured out, okay, you had to have minimum rank, minimum time of experience. You had to go and assess and do all that kind of stuff. So I went through all of that process, got selected, got into it, and was assigned to Hurlburt Field, working with Air Force Special Operations Command on their airframes in December of 2000. And by the summer of 2001, I had gone through the initial training, been spun up on my first gunship platform, which was the U model, AC-130U, the Spooky. And then 9/11 happened, and I quickly difference trained over to the Spectre, which was the older of the two gunship variants at the time that we were flying.
That's a badass plane.
Yeah, they're both of them are just wicked in such a good way. Very, very cool platform, especially with the mission of being able to deliver close air support for troops in need, that sort of thing. Just really, really neat. The funny part about flying on the gunships, even after all the years and hundreds of sorties and, hundreds, thousands of hours, that sort of thing, whenever that what we call gun 6 or gun 3, depending on the platform, when the 105 howitzer goes off, it, to this day, the very first round that kicks off, I still jump.
Oh shit.
And like once it starts firing, then you kind of get in the rhythm and you know
Right.
that it's coming. But even though I knew it was coming, for years of flying on that platform, it would still
Catch you off guard.
Shit, that thing's powerful.
You were talking about it last night, and
Yeah.
it sounded so badass. You said the whole plane was moving when that thing rips
Yeah,
off.
when you feel the jolt. We were describing it. If gun 1, the 25 millimeter on the U model at the time, when that thing would go and do an extended burst, you could kind of feel the front end of the aircraft yaw, and then it gives you that burnt sounds.
Yeah.
Like, brrr. When the 105 goes off, it jolts. Like you feel like the ass end of the aircraft, like it moves.
Oh, I bet.
It recoils inside the aircraft. There's a cage that comes down to keep the gunners from getting in the path of the barrel,
Right.
coming back. But it's just really, really cool the way those things are set up. The guns are they have their different mounts and they're trainable. So wherever the sensors are looking, the guns are aiming. So as the sensor's moving around, when the gun's, trained to a particular sensor, wherever the sensor is moving, you're seeing the gun move in the back of the aircraft as well.
Oh, that's cool.
It's pretty neat.
That's really cool.
But anyway, so I went through all that assessment. I get into
I was just sorry.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
just
yeah.
going to say real quick because it just is on my mind. What a freaking country, man!
Dude,
Like-
I said it last night.
Like we're just sitting there. Some dude is like, "Man, what can we do to kill people better?" And they're like, "I don't know. Let's put an artillery piece in a plane." Like,
That's what we talked about the last night. And then I was
Yeah.
like, dude, it's like the A-10. Like, oh, we have this sick Gatling gun. Like, what should we do with it?
Let's
Oh,
build a plane around it.
Build a plane. Literally.
it's pretty cool.
American ingenuity right there.
You go back to the original C-47s based off the DC-3 platform, and the original Spooky, gets born, and they're doing it with the 7.62 millimeter. It was referred to as Puff the Magic Dragon.
yeah,
Anyway, there's a ton of cool history behind those, and I'm just fortunate to have gotten to be in the right place at the right time and,
Right.
and be part of that. So anyway, we go down a little bit of rabbit hole, but the moral of that story is gunships are fucking cool.
Badass. And America is fucking crazy.
Yeah, so we like them.
Love
So I went out. Where we were in the story. So I had gotten qualified. The towers fell. I immediately spun up on Spectre, and then when I rolled out, we had an initial wave that had deployed out of Hurlburt. They all went to Masira, Oman, and then some of those involved some of our MC-130s and our Pavlo helicopters. And part of that package went forward from Masira into Jacobabad, Pakistan. And then, a couple of weeks behind them, we rolled out as part of that second wave of the initial deployment. So I'm on the ground. I think we left somewhere around the 9th or 10th of October, get there somewhere around the 12th of October. And we're flying our very first mission on the 15th. And you had told a story about some of your teammates, in law enforcement, and how you would have those type of leaders that would take the shield for you when you're
Yeah.
getting ready to go in, or you got to do a breach or what have you.
Right.
I think when we get exposed to those type of people, it's just amazing, and
Amazing.
it teaches you how you should lead and so on. So I was super fortunate. I had kind of the opposite but the same concept, where somebody took the shield for me, but it was a very senior operator. His name was Ken Wellborn. He was huge in bringing me up and raising me, in this specific community. Well, I had
Like a mentor.
I had experience, and I was qualified, and I assessed, and I got there. I still, I was new,
Yeah.
So Ken took me under his wing, and based on what was going on in theater and what we thought, he's like, Rob, you're going to be on the first bird going in. And so he put me literally on Chalk 1, the very first gunship that flew into Afghanistan.
Hooking you up.
And then turned out Ken's specific skill set was even more valuable than mine was. And he ended up being the star of the show. But the guy, he showed me the ropes. He tried to give me the opportunity, and then it just turned out that his particular skills were
Was
more
needed.
in need
Yeah.
for the earliest part of those days. And then I learned what I could from him and leveraged that experience and so on. But anyway,
Sounds like he's a good mentor.
yeah, it was amazing. I make the joke. I didn't know what a rock drill was when we got there.
Yeah.
And he's like, come here, and took me under his wing and showed me the ropes. And so the rock drills, the rehearsal of operations, you sit down and you brief the plan, from start to finish. So one of the first missions had gone down. It was Operation or Objective Gecko and Rhino. And so we were seizing an airfield, which was Objective Rhino, and we were going after Objective Gecko that was Mullah Omar's palace. And so it's a huge joint operation. We had everything from the SOAR, the 160th helicopters. We had their direct attack platforms that were going to provide close air support 500 meters and in. The gunships were doing close air support for 500 meters and out. You had the Chinooks that were carrying folks in and around. You had the 130s that were going to refuel them. They were the variants of the MC-130s. And then the Rangers that were taking over Objective Rhino.
Yep.
And I mean, it was just a wild mission. So that night I flew on the Airborne Mission Commanders platform. That actually was Pete Blaber. And so Blaber was our Airborne Mission Commander. And it was one of my first significant experiences with him. And in that story, we're going after Gecko, and you've got phase lines, and the rules of engagement are like anything that crosses this line is a valid target, and you can kill it. So lo and behold, a coaster bus. It's late at night. This bus is driving along, and it's in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
Well, we get cleared on it. We throw a 105 down in front of it. It speeds up. We have to throw a couple more. The bus stops, and it's obvious that it's a woman and child getting off, and that these are non-combatants.
When he says 105, you're talking about an artillery round that you're shooting. So you guys are shooting for the bus to stop, giving warning shots for people who don't know. Sorry.
So vehicle moving, if you want to stop it, you throw the round out in front of it and hope that it stops, versus the direct engagement of try to kill the bus. And so we put the rounds in front, and then when that happens, it's obvious that it's a woman and child that are getting off, and Blaber's the voice of reason, who immediately recognizes it and calls knock it off, and we just move on. Like, we know that that's not a threat. So ROE it's a valid target, you can kill it, but better judgment says don't do that. And so the crew and the Airborne Mission Commander, you have immediate respect for people when they're doing the right thing, right?
Brother.
So that was my kind of one of my first early experiences with Colonel Blaber at the time. And anyway, life goes on. You fast forward. That's October. By the time March rolls around, a lot of aircrew have come and gone, rotated in and out. I started in Masira. Well, around November, our Spectre moved into theater up in Uzbekistan. And we didn't have anybody up there that was qualified on the gunships, so I needed to move from Masira with the Spookies and the Talon 2s and the various aircraft that were flying out of that location. And they moved me through theater. I went from Masira through Pakistan, got on another bird, and then flew all the way up to Uzbekistan and started supporting the AC-130Hs, the Spectres up there. And so that's November, December time period. They, like, the night that they had deployed, they landed, and within 12 hours they're executing mission. And that's when the prison break at Mazar Sharif went down. They were overhead, all of that.
Yeah.
There's some really, really significant, cool stories. There's the Angel of Death story about the female navigator. The navigator on the Spectre is always the one who's talking to the ground parties. And that funny story about General Dostum, he's on the ground. We've got U.S. Special Forces that are with him, and he's just toying with the adversary on their working frequencies. So he hears the voice of a female come over the radio, and this is Colonel Allison Black. She's known as the Angel of Death. She's amazing,
badass.
Anyway, this story is that Dostum keys up his mic on the enemy frequency while she's talking to the special forces on the ground, And he's like, see, even their women are killing you. He's just totally toying with
Talking
them.
shit, yeah.
But Allison Black becomes the angel of death from that particular story. She goes on, has a very, very successful career, retired wing commander type, and so on. So amazing story. So
Love to see it.
The fast forward, November time period, you've got that going on. The Battle of Tora Bora is going on. They're tail end of November, December, if I remember my dates correctly. I got a chance to fly during all of these like key events, from that very first big hit night mission of Gecko and Rhino through Tora Bora, and then you enter the lull that is the wintertime, and we're all getting ready for the big spring offensive that's going to be Operation Anaconda. So while crews have come in and out, I end up being one of the more experienced. Like when I got there, I was the newbie.
Right.
I had experience, but not on these particular platforms. And then by the time Anaconda comes around, in that specific theater, I'm probably like the highest, number of flights and hours in that country. Granted, there are plenty of people that are more seasoned.
Right.
A lot of my Spectre, brothers and sisters that I was flying with, a lot of them had combat experience from Bosnia, Bosnia, Serbia, and all that kind of stuff. So there was tons of experience in and among. But as far as like my experience in that specific theater, I had been around since the early part of the deployment. So I had gone from the very first gunship that crossed into Afghanistan up to being there when the battle at Roberts Ridge unfolded on the second night of Anaconda.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of pause there, but that's how I ended up in that spot with that particular crew. This one was Grim-32, and from there, Roberts Ridge unfolded, and there's some significant events that happened on night one that kind of set the stage for
night two,
for what happened on night two. But right place, right time. Got a chance to be a part of some significant moments for what went down in Afghanistan after 9/11.
Right. So for you guys that don't so it's called Roberts Ridge as well. So the Battle of Takur Ghar, when Chapman was on the mountain and lost his life, that's what he's talking about, referencing to is Roberts Ridge, because there's different names that people use. So
it's named for Petty Officer Neil Roberts. Right. His teammates called him Fifi. So if you ever hear that, that's who that is. It was called Roberts Ridge because he was the first person killed in that particular battle. And that's with hindsight, because I don't think they realized it at the time. But we can get into that part of the story. But
we will.
But that is Roberts Ridge and why it's named that.
Do you have something to say, Kerr?
Oh, I was just going to state, per record, I believe the official name is Roberts Ridge.
Yeah. Okay. Well, brother, let's dive into Anaconda, Operation Anaconda. So you were stationed with the Spectres, correct?
Yep.
And then so what was your original task for Anaconda that night? So it was the second night, correct?
Yeah.
Did you partake in any of the first day events?
Yeah, I flew back to back on these opening salvos of Anaconda. So
perfect. So let's walk through Anaconda.
To really understand night two and what happened in Roberts Ridge, you have to unpack a little bit of night one.
Right.
And what happened was you're kicking off Anaconda. The concept of operations is known as hammer and anvil. It's going to involve conventional forces and special forces. Special forces are going to be leading in conventional, like in the form of Zia. He was one of the Northern Alliance leaders. So we're going to use indigenous local fighters. That's going to be part of the main element. There's a long story that happens with this, but Zia's fighters fall out, and part of that was our aircraft and an event that happened on night one. So night one is a mess because as all the key elements are trying to get into their positions, they're running into resistance. They realize that enemy is already present in some of the key areas. So as our fighters are getting in there, not the secret, the special reconnaissance Overwatch positions, they over time had sneaky peeked, into their Overwatch positions, and they weren't running into all the problems. Now, some of them did for sure, because we supported them through close air support and so on. There's some really good stories about all of that.
Didn't MAKO 3-1?
Yeah.
They ran into the AA gun.
There you go.
Took it out.
there's a few of them that ran into to trouble, but there were others that had gotten in, and while there were enemy around them, they were able to maintain the element of surprise and so
past.
on. But yeah, there's some interesting events that all unfolded. But
Which is all in the book Alone at Dawn. They explain everything.
It is, and it's documented in a handful. My favorite is Alone at Dawn because I like the totality of the analysis and the approach and the story, and then it specifically tells the story of John Chapman in there as well. But yeah, I would give credit where credit is due. Sean Naylor wrote Not a Good Day to Die. Malcolm McPherson wrote Robert's Ridge. Pete Blaber talks about it in The Mission, The Men, and Me. I love the way Blaber talks about it in his book because he does it what I consider the right way. If an operator is going to publish a book, we don't want to talk too much shop because there's certain elements that just shouldn't be aired publicly, right? But he does a good thing of tie in life lessons and leadership lessons into stories, and then protecting the information that he should protect and so on. So I loved that book. I preached his mantra. I incorporated it into my own leadership style as I was progressing through the ranks over the years. But yeah, so that stuff, night one, the fallacies, the things that had happened. Ultimately, enemy held some of the key positions. Many of our friendlies, as they were working in to get ready to kick off Anaconda, they were running into to contact with enemy positions. And so it turned out that there just wasn't enough close air support available to them that night. And so, guys are having to get it from fast movers, from bombers, from guided, JDAMs, you name it. We're having to leverage everything that's available, but we didn't have enough actual dedicated gunship platforms airborne that night. So in night two, we decided to flood it. So instead of there being, say, 3 over the period of darkness, now we're going with 6.
Yeah.
So in night one, one of the key things that happens, and it affects night 2, there was a fratricide event. And it's fratricide is friendly fire. So we know that there's nothing friendly about friendly fire. And unfortunately, our aircraft, the same crew that was Grim-32 the follow-on night, had an incident where what I thought had transpired, I thought that because we had an airborne mission computer failure that night, we did an airborne realignment. I thought that there had been drift in our system, and ultimately our sensors, where the coordinates say that the sensor's looking, I thought that there had been an error induced based on the airborne realignment.
Okay.
Now that I've gone back and talked to some of the crew members directly involved in all of it, we know in hindsight that the error was not in the location that we were reporting the activity. The issue was the activity that we saw and the lack of overall coordination. So I've done interviews and I've spoken to the possibility of there being an error in our system and the coordinates and so forth. But again, I went back and double checked with my pilot, and he was telling me that him and the navigator from that particular mission had made a point in days afterwards to go back and specifically put eyes on and then compare it back to the notes. So there was no coordinates mix up in that. What had happened was there was the guy's name is Harriman. Unfortunately, he was killed in this event. And it was as a result of our fires from our aircraft. But he had a truckload of Zia's forces, and they were moving through the area. Well, we were returning to base from already having conducted our mission that night. As we're flying through the airspace, we report back to Ultra, which is Blaber, that, hey, we see this activity in this location. And Blaber's comparing notes. He's like, I don't have anybody there. So we describe what we see. And then we end up getting, when you're dealing with close air support, there's different levels of control. And so we're cleared at this point by what we're reporting from someone who has fire control authority to bless us to release fires based on them not seeing the target, but seeing the target through what we're reporting.
Right.
So he gives us, it's a looser form of control for CAS. It goes by types, like type 1, type 2, type 3.
Close air support for the guys that don't understand.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So So they clear us to fire on this. And, before we open up, the first thing you're going to do is check it for friendly markings and all that kind of stuff. So we're looking at the aircraft and normally, or looking at the trucks and the personnel, and normally they would be marked in various manners. And we're not seeing any of the friendly markings and so forth. Well, they clear us to engage. We shoot. And as soon as we start firing, ground party, somebody calls up on the fires net and they're like, ceasefire. And so it, like, all of a sudden you get that bone chilling, like, fuck,
that's not good.
Like, what in the hell's going on? Like, this whole thing, it got looked at, it was assessed, the, accountability, like, ultimately the blame fell on the air crew and the short of it. We took responsibility for it, but when you go through and you look at it, you end up seeing that, okay, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
Like, everybody did exactly what they were supposed to do in this deal. But I don't know in the end if that vehicle just wasn't marked. I think I had read at some point they had said there was a layer of frost that prevented the return.
Oh.
I don't know that was necessarily the reality of it, but it might have been, a plausible explanation. In the end, we checked, we didn't see, we reported a location. The location was accurate. There wasn't drift in the system, but in the end, it doesn't matter how it happened, but unfortunately it did happen.
Right.
It would have been nice to truly have the full aftermath so that you can take away all the right lessons learned.
Right.
But anyway, there's more to that story that can't really be openly explained. But suffice it to say, most everybody involved in that did the right thing that night.
Right.
There was a mistake that was made. Unfortunately, it resulted in the loss of friendlies, and then it scared Zia's forces off of helping us. So instead of being able to have that additional manpower,
it's taken away.
now it's all U.S. or there were others, friendly nations, coalition forces involved, but the local indigenous Afghan fighting force that was going to help us, they were no more.
Yeah.
They fell out of it. So that changed the rules of engagement for night 2. So when we had the loose form of close air support authorization, now we went to the tightest control. You had to be in positive two-way radio comms with a party on the ground who was eyes on the target before you could release fires. And so that comes into play for night 2 and what unfolds at Roberts Ridge.
And that's going to be big.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge.
It made a big difference. So unfortunately, Harriman was killed. It was horrible. It impacted the rules of engagement and how the crews would engage from there.
Yeah, how'd you guys handle that night?
That sucked. I know that there were elements of the personnel and the crew that had made personal visits where when they found out, like, guys were in like field hospital or what have you, gone and tried to visit and so forth. And it's just one of those that you never want to have it happen.
No.
But
it sounds like you guys handle it right, though.
Yeah, I think so. And then you have to somewhat compartmentalize it and move on because you got to fight the next day. And if you let that eat at you, then you're not going to be able to focus on the next mission at hand.
Exactly. And you guys need to be able to focus.
Exactly.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of in We Were Soldiers, where Hastings, they dropped the napalm on the guys, and I'm blanking here, but he looks at Hastings and he's like, "Hey, you forget about that one." But
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it makes sense. No, 100%. Because you can't dwell on it, and not that type of atmosphere for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're in a position where
it's life or death.
Well, not even that. Like, you're keeping dudes alive,
right?
So like, if you let that take you off your A game, like, then it just gets worse from there.
Yeah, it's life or death for those guys for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. I would have folks that would get eat up by certain missions, and specifically as an intelligence capability that was on board the aircraft, like whether or not did they make the right call? Did their call lead to the destruction of a certain enemy? Was it the right thing? What have you? Or whether or not they made the right call on something that was defensive in nature and that sort of thing. And I would always try to help them, like compartmentalize it. Like look, like you are a special capability that gets put on board these aircraft. We're not always on every single one.
Right.
And so like, just ask yourself, is it better or worse if you're there or not there? Like, what would have happened if you weren't?
Exactly.
So it goes back to
Right.
mindset, and
Yes.
you have to find things half full, not half empty,
100%.
and so forth. So I think that's what helps with resilience, and everybody deals with it
Agreed.
if you're dealing in these types of life or death type situations, and so on.
Agreed. Anything else in night one, or you want to move to two?
No, that was the main thing for night one. There's some key events.
Oh, absolutely.
The night one of Anaconda resulted in what we call the MAKO trophy. And it's like the most significant combat mission. It was one of my sister ships. They had shot. I want to say it was somewhere around somewhere in here. We had just. I want to say that night. I'm going to get these things mixed up, but somewhere in this time period, one of us had shot 175 105 rounds, and we had Winchestered that night. And that was what you call when you run out of bullets.
Sick.
Winchester in a gunship is a good night.
That's a really
it's a
good
bad
night.
night for the enemy.
Yeah.
Good night for us. There was like an immediate follow-on night where like we're all like, "Hey, that was pretty cool. I think that was a record."
Yeah.
And then the very next night, somebody goes out and shoots 176. And it wasn't like they were trying to. It just happened to be like they had one extra round or whatever the case may be. Anyway,
Had it went up,
it was there were a lot of targets out there
bet.
during that time period.
Oh, if you read the book, it's nuts. Like Jay Hill, like his section into the book, he's torching.
Yeah.
He's torching people.
Yeah, there are legends among that community. Air Force Special Tactics, the combat controllers, pararescue, you name it.
Oh God, yeah.
Jay, if I started naming names out of there, I'd leave somebody out. But there's some pretty bad dudes in there.
Some true American patriots,
Yes.
baby.
Yeah.
100%.
Sure.
So when I roll into night two, brother?
Yeah. So night two, when what's going on is you now have an element MAKO that's going to insert to one of the mountaintops at Takur Ghar. It was an area that the other teams hadn't gotten to. I think somebody had tried to get there and weren't able to make it, and they had to make an adjustment or whatever. Well, the SEALs were at Bagram, and AFO, Advanced Force Operations, they were operating out of Gerdez. They're led by Pete Blaber. He's call sign Ultra 01, and he's in charge of all of those special reconnaissance teams that had gone in and done the overwatch positions. So what you have is that whole hammer and anvil. The hammer is supposed to be those forces that are going to push the enemy up against the anvil that is the special forces.
Right.
And then they're going to get schwacked with all of the close air support and bombs coming from a variety of platforms, whether they're Air Force or Navy or what have you.
Because a lot of those elements had CCTs attached to it that were calling those close air support.
Yep. If not that, they had TACP.
Yep.
The other people that specialize in calling in for close air support. There's a qualification Joint Terminal Attack Controller, JTAC. The teams would be JTAC qualified.
Yeah.
And that would be, the person who can talk to the aircraft to get fires called
those dudes
in
are
and
badass.
that sort of stuff. Yeah.
There's some badass dudes. We talked about it last night of like the quality of a CCT.
Yeah.
And how like they're such a quiet professional. And you ask anyone what a combat controller is, they have no clue.
Yeah, they're not very well known, and that might be a good thing.
Right.
So the quiet professionalism and so forth that runs true to anybody in the special operations community. That's what you're raised on, is being a quiet professional. Walk softly, carry a big stick. Don't brag about it. Don't talk
Right.
about stuff. And which is kind of funny, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But like, why are we talking about this right now? But with that. When you talk about JTACs and people that are qualified to do that, combat control are like the baddest of the bad when it comes to like these dudes. They have to train to every other special forces standard because they are a special operator that gets embedded within those other teams. And that goes for the PJs as well.
Right.
Like they all train to those higher standards because they have to train to that of special forces. They have to train to that of the Navy SEALs. And so when you or Force Recon, like MARSOC, whatever those teams are that you need to embed them in, they have to train to the minimum standard of all of them. So therefore, there's a strong argument to say that they're more highly trained than any of the others.
Well, and I think we touched on this when we interviewed Eric and we were talking about it, and you're training to the standards of all the different SF groups in the U.S., right? But then at the same time, you've also got to be able to integrate with like Polish Grom or SAS or Australian. So
yeah, it's crazy.
Like, yeah, you got to step it up to GBs, Delta, SEALs, whatever, right? But then on top of it, you're like, well, shit, like now I'm attached to Grom, right? Like, now I got to do what they do, right? Or it's even spoken about it in the book Alone at Dawn. I can't think of the guy's name, but he was attached to Australian SAS.
Yeah, you get to be a squared away operator, 100%, man.
Yeah.
And those guys are also squared away, like mentally, just fucking smart. You have to be, because you're dealing with all these different aircrafts, all different capabilities, and then all of a sudden you have to be back in a gunfight as you're calling in an airstrike. I mean, that's pretty fucking sick, dude.
Yeah, it's wild. What's I won't even say it. It'd be like the nerd trying to hang out with the jocks. But I was going to make a comment about they have the longest training pipeline.
Yeah.
And then my specialty as an intelligence guy, like my pipeline is the second longest in the Air Force training arsenal.
And you should be proud of that, dude.
Yeah,
that's not
it's
an
wild.
easy task to undergo. What you also did in the Air Force is fucking crazy.
When you look at where they are, like we're always like the nerds, and at one point in my career I would have taken offense to that, and then you learn to embrace it, and you realize
embrace the shit out of that.
There was a funny story. It came from the special tactics community, but we were attending an award ceremony for the guys that are going through professional development classes, and we always have some really smart kids that are doing what we do in the Air Force. And so they tend to take a lot of the trophy hardware from the classes in the form of top graduates and that sort of thing. And so one of the special tactics colonels, he's a STO, a special tactics officer, and he's one of the either group or wing commanders that's there. And he's like, yeah, it's the intel nerds again. And I was like, careful, Colonel, those are killer nerds.
Killer nerds, baby.
Yeah. So our unit, we have a unofficial motto. The motto for the unit was "Born Under Fire," because when the unit stood up, it happened to stand up during officially it stood up during the first Gulf War, and so the unit was born under fire because they were putting an intelligence capability on board special operations to help prevent bad things happening. Those birds. They go beyond enemy lines, they go into harm's way, and we wanted to make sure that we embedded a capability, whether it be for self-protection or eventually what we grew it into, being able to use it in an offensive manner as well. So
absolutely,
one of our unofficial motto became "We Hear Dead People," and
that's actually really good.
We stole it from the movie "I See Dead People."
Yeah,
but it was cool. So I was joking with the colonel and was like, "Careful, those are killer nerds."
Those are killer nerds, baby.
But yeah, we've over the years we had opportunity to do some really cool stuff, whether it be defensive or offensive.
Right.
One of the guys that trained me, he had flown in Serbia, and his name's Jack, and we called him Frank. Amongst the crew, we were the DISO, the direct support operator, and so Frank was short for Frank F. DISO. Because nobody could remember the Dizzo's name.
Yeah.
But they were just like, I don't know, it's Frank fucking Dizzo.
Frank fucking Dizzo.
And so Jack becomes known as Frank Dizzo. Well, he flew on the Pavlo that led the 60, what would have been, we had the Pavlo and the Pave Hawks. So the 60s were the Pave Hawks. They had the rescue package on board.
Right.
But the Pavlo had all the defensive capability to get them into harm's way. And so there's a story. General Goldfein got shot down over Serbia, and he describes it in a couple of posts. And when he was serving with us, he would say that it was his least proud moment in his aviation career when he successfully intercepted an SA-3 missile, which meant that the missile shot him. Right? So General Goldfein's amazing leader, just awesome man. Jack flew the payload that led the rescue package in to pick up General Goldfein.
Okay.
So at the time, he's either squadron commander or director of operations for what we call the Triple Nickel. They're a historically significant fighter unit out of Aviano, and anyway, Goldfein's there in Serbia. And there's a ton of air defenses, and it's like a pretty nasty environment. Surface-to-air missiles, the radars, radar AAA, anti-aircraft artillery, all kinds of stuff. So he gets shot down piloting an F-16, and needless to say, he was in harm's way. Well, he lands, after ejecting, right? And now he's in survivor mode.
Yeah.
And we got to go rescue him in the same gauntlet area that he just got shot down.
Of course.
So you got to fly through the nastiness in order to go rescue somebody. Well, Jack is the intel guy, the Dizzo on board the Pablo. And suffice it to say, Jack was very significant in their ability to get there. So Jack does his job. He cues the crew to know that the enemy air defenses are out there and they're literally about to shoot them. And so they get what we call an uncorrelated SA-6. It's a big missile. It's a gainful missile, as we call it. But they didn't illuminate with the radar because if they illuminated with the radar, then we're probably going to shoot back at them because they emit. Then we know it, and then we can put a high-speed anti-radiation missile, a harm missile, right down their throats. So one of those tactics to avoid the enemy air defenses from getting shot up back then was to try and sneak the missile off the rail and then illuminate. Jack calls the shot. The aircraft, scanners are on high alert. They see the missile inbound. They split the formation. The missile goes right through them. Yeah. So Jack trained me how to do this job. And between that and Ken, who took the shield and looked out for me and took me under his wing, that sort of deal.
You had some good guys above you for
pretty
sure.
Cool.
Love it.
So say that we get back to actual night 2. The mission for us is to be the emergency on-call CAS platform. So everybody's got a mission. We have flooded it. There's a ton of close air support available because of everything that had unfolded on the night prior. We take off out of Uzbekistan. We're flying south through Afghanistan airspace, and our first event is to go hit a tanker in Pakistan. As we're transiting, the airspace will be divided into what we call kill boxes, and it's just the grids on the map and so forth. And it's a way for you to quickly identify, areas of operation and that sort of stuff. So we're flying through all the valid kill boxes where Anaconda's going to be. We're not directly overflying it, but we're close to it.
Yeah.
Because we're just transiting south. Well, when that happens, the MAKO element is supposed to be infilling to Takur Ghar. They're going to be covered by AC-130 U model. It was a nail call sign. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly which one. It would have been nail 2 something. But a U model gunship is supposed to cover their infill. While this is going on, the helos break and they get delayed. Then Caust airfield in the area comes under attack by the enemy. So command and control rolls nail that was covering the MAKO infill over to Caust airfield. And we hear this unfolding on the radio, and we actually talked to the command and control element was called Boss Man. They're on an AWACS platform. So that's the one with the big radome on top. Airborne.
That's flying
Rory.
around. If you've ever been to DC, it's always flying around.
Yeah, so it's got the big radar, uses command and control, has the air picture, it can see what's going on, that sort of thing. So we're talking to them, say, hey, are you sure you want Nail to go and handle that? We're the emergency on-call CAS platform. Nail has a dedicated mission. Are you sure you don't want us? Nope, proceed to tanker. It's like they didn't want to disrupt the tanker flow, and they thought that everything was going to be okay rolling Nail over there since the helos were delayed. Well, Murphy pops his head up many a time during this particular night. And so the helos now get well, and they've taken the initial call from Nail, who was in a distanced standoff orbit. So initially, while they're waiting on the helos to come in and infill, they're not going to highlight the specific infill position, right? So from a distance, they're looking at the objective area. Well, they don't see based on the fidelity of the sensors and the distance that they're at the time. Nowadays, you get things that are high def and like it's crazy. But 2001, 2002, it wasn't quite there yet. So they call the area clear, and then when the helos get well, the team's like, we can just go ahead on in. We've worked with them before. We trust what they call, but the standoff distance was so much that they didn't get the accurate depiction of what was really present there on the mountain, and that was enemy that was already entrenched and had been up there for months.
Right.
So we're on tanker. The helos get well. They're coming in, and then the next thing we know, we hear Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Any Grim, any nail. This is MAKO 30 Charlie, and that's John Chapman on the radio. And what has just happened is the initial failed insertion of MAKO 30 on the call sign was Razor 03. That was Alan Mack's MH47. They had come under fire, and that's when Roberts gets knocked out of the helicopter. He falls on top of the LZ, and then Mack has to just do this incredible display of airmanship, and through him and his whole crew for that matter. The hydraulic lines are ruptured.
Yeah.
They're having to dump the cans in, as Alan has described. Like, it's just amazing that they were able to set that bird down and not all perish.
He'd be like seconds or minutes without hydraulic steering.
It was wild.
Yeah, and he would get it back and he'd readjust it. That's nuts.
They get the aircraft down a few clicks north in the valley. It's Shahikot Valley. When that happens, that's when Chappie's on the radio as 30 Charlie with that Mayday call.
Yeah.
So he's calling in for cover, because they're now in survivor mode with a crashed helo on the valley floor, and they know that there's enemy around. So they're not under immediate like direct fire or anything like that, but in a situation like that, you want to get somebody overhead immediately.
Yeah, they have a man down. Yeah,
and when you do that, A10's Sandy call sign, if somebody's Sandy qualified, they're specifically qualified to be rescue, A10. They do a thing called on-scene command. So there's an on-scene commander checklist. Well, the crew that I was flying with is very, very experienced. I've got their weapons school graduates. They've done, they've been there.
Yeah.
So my pilot, one of the absolute best. This was probably out of the direct support operators that were at Uzbekistan. This was probably one of our favorite crews. There were a couple of them, and one of them is now a General Farrell. We loved flying with him as well.
Love it,
and not just because you made all those stars, General Farrell, but because you were an awesome guy. Anyway, my pilot, he had the on-scene commander checklist and so forth. So we just assumed that role because you're over a crash and now you got a process.
Right.
How are you going to get them rescued? That sort of thing. Well, no sooner do we show up and figure out what's going on. They're telling us that they lost a teammate on top of the mountain and asked us to shift our eyes over there and make that our priority. At the same time, Razor 04, their sister ship had already gone and done a separate infill of another team. And so they were supposed to link back up. Well, he's looking for status on the Razor 03. He's on the other side of mountains, so he doesn't have line of sight communication. So he's talking to us because they can hear us on that net. And now we're telling him the status of 03 and then coordinating with John Chapman the rescue of Razor 03. So 04 is going to come in and get 03. They're going to reconstitute. And then the objective now is that since they lost a teammate on top of the mountain, they're trying to figure out how they're going to go back up there and get that teammate, which is Petty Officer Neil Roberts.
Right.
So that leads to what is essentially like a hasty recovery mission. The planning, everything's going to have to go down rather quickly, but it seems like it takes forever because there's fuel considerations. There's problems with the helicopter plan and them having to go back to their safe house in Gerdez, and then finally get back over there. And meanwhile, we're just maintaining that orbit. And what we see when they told us to immediately put eyes on, we see Roberts. We don't know him by name, but we see an American there on top of the mountain, just laid out. and the strobe's going off, and so you can see on the sensors the IR strobe.
And that's how you guys indicate that it's an American.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, as we see that, they're looking at the area, and if you've ever looked at any of the the Dan Schilling narrated video,
Right.
That I like that that narration of the video because it tells the events throughout that initial piece, especially with John Chapman's actions and
Right.
what led to him being awarded the Medal of Honor. It takes the viewpoint from a number of different sensors, not just the gunship, but also some Predator footage. And then a lot of it, is that narration, while it's focused on John and what he did to earn the Medal of Honor, it does a really good job of telling the story. But there's a little bit of, editing for the sake of time.
Right.
But, some folks out there, especially in some of the SEAL community, as you get to the difference in the narratives that are out there, there are people that will critique that video. Well, you could critique it, yes, but for the purpose that video was put together, it tells what it's supposed to tell,
right?
And there's no camera tricks or Hollywood magic going on. It's just there's editing for the sake of time, to have the consolidated key events
right.
and be able to tell the story.
Right.
So
otherwherwise you're going to have
it was hours.
Yes, hours
right?
of footage.
So when we first put eyes on, we see Roberts, the strobes going off as the sensors are gaining situational awareness of what they're looking at. You can see what we described as rat lines, and it was where the snow had melted from foot traffic. You're like, somebody's up here.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen from this one dude, because there's if you did an exploded view of an anthill, that's kind of what it looked like. You see the trails going all over the place.
Right.
So we see that strobe, and then all of a sudden you see enemy just come out of the woodwork, and next thing you know, they're surrounding him, and then the strobe gets extinguished. We don't know what's going on, but eventually they move his body from where it is up against the boulder. It's a big rock outcrop, and if you look at a variety of videos or interviews, they always refer to that as the boulder up there. Well, he's propped up against the boulder, and we've got eyes on. We have to assume that he's a survivor, that we need to go back
right.
and get him. What's not known in real time, the Predator is flying in the area, and they have a newer sensor, and they have better fidelity. They could tell that the enemy had killed him, but they're not in comms with us because they're working for a very, very special customer.
Right.
So, we're pretty special, but there's even others out there. So you can kind of read between the lines on that one. But anyway, they know that Roberts has actually been killed at this point, and had we known that probably would have affected the decision calculus into how the recovery operation
right.
or rescue operation. You think you're going into, it would be rescue somebody.
Now you're going for recovery.
And then, if you knew that it was a recovery, you could have taken a different approach and so forth. So I know that's, a lot of what impacts the decision, calculus, whether you're talking about, Britt Slabinski as the team leader, who was also awarded the Medal of Honor from this evening, or other leaders that are involved in the command and control of it, whether they're part of that immediate team or the advanced force operation led by Blaber, or the SEALs leadership that was back at Bagram, that was there with the special operations leadership team that was around. There's a lot of folks that want to cast blame for what happened. I'd like to shed some light on that, because I think I've got a perspective that's definitely relevant, and having been there, and then through the hindsight of analysis and familiarity with the mission and so on. So there's some things still to be said about that. But as the recovery operation rescue unfolds, the team decides that they're going back and they're going to go save Roberts. Not knowing that he's already been killed at this point. Embedded in that team is John Chapman as their combat controller. It's essentially 6-man team plus John, and then Roberts is now fallen out. So you get 6 guys going in to recover this what would have been one of their original 7.
Right.
So when they come in, we're trying to formulate a plan and how we're going to do it. And we know that there's enemy up there. We've seen them already. And then the discussion is like, hey, can you engage them? Like, well, they're danger close to Roberts, who's down there. And so the rules of engagement had literally just changed from night 1. So we're hesitant to fire,
Right.
because of the rule of engagement in that particular sense, and you're danger close to a potential survivor.
Right.
So had we known that he had been killed,
It'd be a different
then
story.
totally different story. We would have laid waste, done pre-assault fires. We would have shot anything and everything that we could have up there. But as all of that is unfolding in real time, we think that there's a potential survivor. So like if it's, that if that 105 or a 40 Mike or whatever artillery round goes off, you have minimum engagement safe zones.
Right.
We call it JMM standard. So that like if I fire this round, it has an explosive radius of X, whatever that is.
Right.
And so you know that anybody within that proximity, that becomes danger close. The only way that you can fire a danger close round is with specific authorization from the individual that is danger close.
Right.
And they have a technique of how they do that and so on. So we weren't going to, even if somebody had requested it, we weren't going to get the danger close authorization, which that's the proximity of where everybody was. So it just wasn't going to work.
Right.
We talked about some different ideas, and I had almost forgotten about it over the years. But when I had done another podcast, one of the interviewers had asked, well, did you guys think about say firing on the far side and maybe walking the rounds in? I was like, actually, yeah, that did come to mind. And they did openly discuss that. But ultimately, the decision was don't put down the fires because of the danger close piece and the potential of Robert still being alive. So their mission comes in, and we're identifying a spot. We're lasing it. The sensors have identified a suitable area where we know that Chinook can land and the team can come back in. And so we've offset them a little bit from the immediate area that they initially planned to infill. Like people would call it the X. If it's the objective, if you land on the X, you're landing on the objective. Usually you would never, if you're putting in a reconnaissance overwatch team, you would never land on the X because you don't want to highlight that position. You would do something in the form of an offset and let them patrol their way to it, and then they can do it under the cover of darkness or whatever, and they could sneak into the position and not highlight where they're going to be operating from. Well, these guys initially tried to infill up there. They had come under enemy fire. They lose Roberts. We know where Roberts is now. And in this hasty, recovery rescue effort, they decide that they're going to go right back to the X. They don't tell us. So we're lasing the spot for them. We've highlighted it, and the pilots can see it on the helicopter, and they go right through our spot, and they go right back to the X. And so what's interesting about this is, in hindsight, you can go back and look at a handful of the interviews and so on, and why there's issue with this particular mission is because there's this variance of narratives that are out there.
Right.
And so sadly, like the SEALs have a variation of the truth, and I think a lot of it goes to try and save face. For example, why didn't they land where we told them to?
Right.
Well, if you go back and look at some of the other interviews with Slab, there's a point where Slab says, I asked the pilot, was there any other suitable landing area up there? And he told me no. So we had to go back to that, no matter what. Well, that's horseshit. Like he knows that because they had planned originally to do an offset when their mission was originally trying to go the night before. They delayed it because they needed a little bit more time. They weren't going to be able to, everything got compressed on their timeline.
Right.
And so for him to come out after the fact and say, I had to go back to the X. Well, bro, we all know that's not true.
That's not true.
We were identifying it for you, and he had the tactical control to determine where they infilled. as the team leader.
I think we have that video, right?
Yeah.
So we'll we're not gonna play it right now because we'll have to search for it. But
Okay.
we'll
Yeah,
get
pull it up.
yeah, save a spot for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the cue. So when we let me figure out where I was.
You want to take a quick break?
Yeah. Let's
do a
quick
and we'll
break.
we'll find the video and then we'll play it and we'll come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Murphy Carter Law. This one I'm proud to announce. This is a great partnership with us. They are a phenomenal law firm. I've known Rick for a very long time. He's a fantastic guy. Heart of gold. He supports organizations like Project Fire Buddies who give back to kids with terminal illness. This guy cares. He is a staunch advocate for first responders. He's just a blue-collar guy. He really is. He was a union construction worker at one point, and now he's just a shark in the courtroom. And that's just a fact. You're not going to go wrong by going with Murphy Carter Law. I promise you that. They will fight for you like they fight for their own family, like they fight for their mother, like they fight for their father, their brother, or their sister. That's just who they are. And they advocate for you guys. I promise they will fight for you guys tooth and nail. That's what they're all about, to make you guys whole again or to get you close to that as possible and by any means necessary. They've won major cases already. I have some notes over here. They have $11.5 million truck accident case. They have a $9.5 million medical malpractice case and another $7.1 million delivery truck accident. They handle their business. If you're looking for a lawyer, if you've been in a situation like Carrie and I have, Murphy Carter Law, check them out. Go to murphycarterlaw.com. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Tell them that Beyond the Dispatch sent you. So we're back from break. So Carrie is able to find, or Google was able to find the video that we're looking for. You ready to play it?
I mean, it's all thanks to Rob, but yeah,
But I mean,
we found it.
But is it Google or is it Carrie?
Oh, no, we're
I
gonna
mean,
carry
like
it
I think Carrie.
I think Google
we
was
just
on it.
carried it.
I think we
right?
just carried it. Yeah. So we just carried it. So we carried the video thanks to Rob. And thanks for Rob for our new coin phrase.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
all right, Barry, you ready to play that video?
So real quick before you
go
hit play, this video is it's Britt Slabinski. He's wearing his Medal of Honor around his neck. This is him on a speaking tour, and this has to do with the National Medal of Honor Museum and it getting kicked off and so forth. The president of the Medal of Honor Museum is Chris Cassidy. Chris Cassidy is also a Navy SEAL, and so he was not only a Navy SEAL, he was like an astronaut. It's pretty cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And what's also interesting is he was in the battle space when Takur Ghar goes down, and I don't think they even realized it. So
Really?
if you look at this interview, like in its entirety, it's pretty interesting. But then if you have followed, like the overall story of Roberts Ridge and so forth, you'll see some of the things that are that don't match up with regards to the narrative, associated with
Right.
either the Navy, the SEALs, Britt Slabinski specifically, and so forth. So this particular clip, we were just talking about, like why they had to infill back to the X.
Right.
And so what I'm telling you is that, like, I believe that Britt Slabinski made a tactical decision as the team leader to go back to the X for the expediency of being able to get to Roberts.
Right.
All right. So when they say that there wasn't any other area, well, we know that there was another area because we were lasing it.
Right.
And then here, it's interesting to me, rather than him coming out and saying, I made the decision to go back to the X, why not just own it?
Right. Exactly.
Instead, now this clip, he says he asked the pilot that he says flew him back for the reinsertion, and that's Alan Mack, and you can look at Alan Mack's interviews, and Alan says, no, I did not fly him back up there. I don't think he, at the time of those interviews, I don't think he realized. that Slab has worked this into his version of recount. I try to be as kind and gentle as I can, but I hope that folks see what I'm trying to do while also not look like I'm being a complete ass about it, and
Right.
trying to maintain my own integrity and credibility on the subject. But anyway, this video is Slab saying that the pilot told him there's no other place to land.
Made the decision we're going to go. Amazing thing for the pilot from the first aircraft that got shot down was standing right there. He said, "I'm flying you in." Think of this. So the guy just got shot down, right? And now he's like, "Nope, I'm going to fly it back in." And it's absolutely, I needed that because he's the only guy on this aircraft knows where we're going. So, I mean, you think of what that guy's going through. I asked him, I was like, "Hey, any place else for us to land?" What do you think he says? "Yeah, no. Yeah, we got to go to the same spot." I'm like, yeah. Yeah, great.
Wow.
Yes, and we launched.
Yeah, so you can go back and you can find a number of Alan Mack interviews. I think that Alan says that other pilot's name was Jethro.
Okay.
But so you had 03 was the first aircraft piloted by Alan Mack that was flying in MAKO. They failed insertion. He saves their lives, crashes it in the valley. 04 picks up 03 to rescue those guys and allow them to reconsolidate and so forth. They go back to the safe house, and then Razor 04 comes in to reinsert with these guys. Then you have the QRF, like after the battle at Roberts Ridge, the QRF comes in with Razor 01 and 02. So 01 has the failed. They have the fate of landing right back on the same X because none of the information got completely relayed to them. And then 2 offsets because 1 took fire and immediately when they tried to reinsert. So before we get to the QRF piece, so they land on the X, and Slab tells it in his own words. It's in the debriefs and so forth, but he's the first one off, and we know the order of them exiting based on debriefs. So from that point, our imagery analysts are able to now assign order of the hotspots, the people that are coming off in the footage, and then through their equipment, they can basically maintain a chain of custody because your IR signature is different than mine, is different from Carrie's.
Right.
Okay, so we know the order that they left. Then you know that this is person number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So Slab takes a header off the end of the ramp when he jumps down. He misjudges the depth of the snow, and it ends up being a heck of a lot deeper, and he falls over. He's got snow in his face and his goggles and so forth. Well, that's what put Chappie on point, because Chappie leaves the aircraft, sees what happened. He leapfrogs Slab, and now he's the lead person that is on the ground as the team is getting their initial bearings. So what happens from there is the team kind of forms a wagon wheel, and then Chappie's a little bit up the slope from them, and in the midst of all of this, they start taking enemy fire. And so I've had other operators. I'm an aircrew guy. I'm not somebody that fights on the ground type of deal. But those that are familiar with the ground tactics have explained it to me that in a near ambush situation, you attack the attacker. You have to fight your way through it, because otherwise you're sitting duck. So Chappie, like when they start taking fire, you can see, and this is well depicted in the Schilling narration. You can look at that, and Chappie is leading towards Bunker 1, where the most formidable threat is at the moment. And so he takes out Bunker 1 essentially single-handedly. And so where this comes into play is there's versions of the Slab story that he co-assaulted that bunker. And technically, did they both go towards that bunker? Yes. But when you look at the video, you can see that Slab is in trail behind John. He's not offset to where he has a good line of fire to put fire on the same target. John is the one who's eliminating that target. So when they get up there, you see John at point blank fire again into the bunker. He jumps in and then comes out on the other side. And then where Slab comes up, he comes in, and then that's where Slab fires the confirmatory rounds into the bodies. And then Slab ends up going to the left of the bunker. And so he's in between the bunker and the boulder.
Explain the size of the boulder for everybody listening.
Yeah, so it's rather large. In the shilling narration, you get good perspective because you'll see one of the team members get on top of the boulder. He climbs up with the saw, and he's putting fires down on bunker 2. And then eventually a grenade gets thrown over. It frags him, and he falls and slides off the boulder. So like you can tell that it's essentially like, you know, a little bit taller than a one story. So it's like being up on the roof of a one story type of structure. It's significant. Like it's big.
Yeah.
And when you look at that video, you can see the perspective because you have human sized target and then the rock.
Right.
When that's going on. So just as people get ready to look at it, when you orient yourself, you've got the big boulder that's there. And this is as I'm looking from the perspective of where they infilled. So I'm looking up the slope towards the boulder and bunker 1. So you got boulder where Roberts is kind of propped up against it. We think that the enemy had him there as bait, knowing that we would come back for him.
Right.
But unfortunately, he's dead at this moment. So you've got boulder, Roberts, and then a little bit of a break, and that's where bunker 1 is off to the right of the boulder. There's a tree that they called the bonsai tree, and then when Chappie comes in, eliminates the threats, pops out on the other side, he's on one side of the bonsai tree, and Slab is between bunker 1 and the boulder on the other side of the tree. And there's a lot of terrain there. So when we went back and did all the imagery analysis, the imagery analysts that did that work, they went down and they mapped that mountaintop down to the gnat's ass. So you could take a person, if you say, you know, you're 6'4", you know, you could take that person, put them in a standing, kneeling, prone position, whatever, and you could show and spin them 360 and show exactly what their field of view was. That's how well they had mapped all of this, to include with the tree and the boulder and all of those other terrain features. So where Roberts or where Slab is and where Chapman are, they know each other's there, but is there a true clear line of sight?
Right.
You know, our analysis showed that there wasn't. So that comes into play because of what Slab describes and where he says that Chapman was killed and so forth. But anyway, they're both directing fire now against the most significant threat, which is bunker 2, and it's elevated behind bunker 1, and it's like they're pretty well entrenched. It's a formidable threat. So you've got Chappie on one side of the tree, you got Slab in between the tree and the boulder. You've got 2 guys covering downslope, facing down the hill from where they infilled, and you've got another 2 that have gone around the left side of the boulder, and so they're basically split up into 2-man fire teams.
Right.
And then essentially they're I don't know if I want to call it overwhelmed, but they're like tactically it's not a good situation. They're taking casualties. John gets hit. It's believed that John is killed at this moment. And this is where some variations come in the story, like whether or not Slab, saw the laser on his weapon and the rise and fall of his chest, and then he stopped breathing and so forth. And then that was like one recount. And then later on in the evolution of their narrative, he says that he crawled directly over the top of John. Well, we have the footage, like we see exactly where they went, and he did not crawl over the top of John Chapman.
Right.
If anyone, he crawled over the top of Neil Roberts. But oddly, the SEALs in their immediate aftermath, they said that they never found Roberts. They were literally right on top of him.
Right.
So
right by the boulder.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this stuff comes back into play because, in that immediate aftermath and them doing their initial debrief and so on, like there was sensor footage that was watching what was unfolding on the mountain after the team had broken contact and so on. So like they knew that there was fighting that continued up there, but that's where the 3 different theories come in. Was it Neil Roberts? Was it John Chapman? Or was it red on red?
Right.
So once they figured out that Neil Roberts was absolutely dead and it was verified, then they couldn't resurrect him and make him hero of the day, even though he did very heroic things on there, which we haven't seen that footage because they pulled that stuff back for
Yeah.
sake of the family and so on. But
Right.
but when he fell out of the helicopter, like there's footage out there that shows that he fought.
Yeah.
So he was limited in what he could do, but he fought. Then with the Chapman piece, like we had all this footage then comes back to life. So initially it was all confiscated. So we didn't have it. Like we didn't have all that footage to be able to go back and do hot washes, lessons learned, you name it. Like the SEALs literally showed up at Uzbekistan like within a day or so and confiscated all of the footage. But where all this comes into play is because when the team is there and they've taken casualties, guy gets shot, Chappie's down, guy gets fragged by the grenade. They're going to pop smoke and tactically, reposition, call it retreat, whatever, but they're going to break contact because it's not to their advantage at the moment. So they throw smoke grenades and the team slides off and down. If you're from the perspective of where they first infilled, it would have been over to the right, is where they put terrain between them and the enemy. So they go down the slope. And there's literally like sliding down, like it's steep.
Yeah.
So they get distance and a little bit of cover, and that's when we're finally able to get them in positive two-way radio comms, which we've been waiting, with bated breath, like just come on, guys, somebody answer us. We had tried to call them. We could hear them, but they couldn't hear us for some reason, and we never heard Chappie try and call us, which you would have expected from the combat controller. Right. Somewhere in there, in the Razor 03 and the 04 pickup and so forth, there's a decision made to go very light. And so they're dropping and shedding gear, and this is recounted in Slab Zone words and so forth. But that impacted the radio loadout that Chappie would have carried. And so he dropped his big radio and went with the embitters, which are smaller, like hand portable, but he's still supposed to be outfitted with the right antennas and so forth. But for whatever reason, we never hear Chappie up on the radio. So you don't get that initial call for fire until you hear Slab come up on the radio, and to the tune of hey, Grim, need you to put effective fire on top of the mountains now. We're no longer on top of the mountain. Got troops down, possible KIA, need fire on tops now, is effectively what he says in that radio transmission. And we think when he says possible KIA, we think he's talking about Roberts.
Right.
We don't realize that one of the assaulters is now separated from the rest of the team and so forth. So Chappie at this point is kind of underneath the foliage of the bonsai tree.
Right.
So we've lost track of him momentarily in real time from the gunship. With the hindsight of gaining access to the various footage, you can piece it all back together and see what's going on, because shortly after they make that initial call for fire, we start shooting. Of course, I told you Murphy pops up. Well, Murphy popped up again. We had a gun malfunction. It was a malfunction on gun 5 where we were trying to put the 40 mic down. And so it's a Bofors cannon, dates back to World War II, common on Navy ships and so forth. But anyway, that gun's down for a moment, and we're going to switch to gun 6, which is the 105 millimeter. Well, now we've got a prox round loaded in that one, and you don't want to fire that prox round because it's got a Doppler fuse and it explodes before impact, and then it shrapnels. So with the potential of a survivor in there, with the last radio transmission is possible KIA,
right?
We don't know, so we have to assume, and so you're thinking safety of the person on the ground. So they got to switch that round out and put a point detonating round in. So that takes about half an orbit, like between working the malfunction on one gun and the other. Like he's come up and it's urgent, right? And we're like a minute before we can get the round out, where normally the round would already be in the breech and he would have said fire and we would have gone boom. And we would say rounds away, and then they'd wait for impact. Well, it takes a minute to fix the gun malfunction. Thanks, Murphy.
Yeah.
So They go to PD, infrared sensor operator. That's the footage that you often see that's white hot or black hot.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, most of our footage I think is black hot. In this case, so you see the people, they look hot. Anything that's hot is black. The melted foot pads are darker, and so if it's white, it's cold. If it's black, it's hot.
Right.
So you can see all of this stuff transpire. So IR shooting, TV is maintaining position on the friendlies because we deconflict those fires to make sure that we don't inadvertently put artillery rounds down on a friendly position. In the midst of that, it's like this coordinated dance. So the IR's primary, he's shooting the gun. Well, the TV that's keeping track of the friendlies, he has that location stored. He's going to look at the friendly position, and then he's going to go back and forth between what's being engaged and then the friendly position.
Right.
That way he can help blend, the overall situational awareness, because the TV sensor, he sees light. Nowadays you got sensors where all this stuff is fused and you get it all in one picture.
Right,
It's
right.
super cool. But back then it was infrared heat and it was TV sensor, for based on light. So imagine being able to look through night vision goggles. That's effectively what the TV sees. His sensor on that gunship, it was advertised it could illuminate ambient light 60,000 times whatever it actually was. So it's like night vision goggles for the
Right.
airplane. But it's also tied to guns, and you could train the sensor, and then when they're trained, the gun is pointing where the sensor is pointing, and then that's how they have such lethal precision fires and so on. So he's going back and forth. He can see light, and all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, fire control officer," he calls him FOCO. "Hey, FOCO, I got another strobe up here." He's like, "This one looks different. It's like seems different." So the crew then goes through a little bit of deconfliction. IR stops shooting at the moment. They go back and they reconfirm. Okay, the friendlies are here. Both IR and TV confirm that, and the IR goes back and says, "I'm shooting here," and then TV's like, "Yeah, and I got another strobe and it's right here, but this one doesn't look like the others." In hindsight, I tell you that the reason why that one doesn't look like the others is because this is the moment where John has come to, and there's actually footage where you can see him crawling back into bunker number one. And so when TV's saying he sees this other strobe, he didn't see in real time John like moving, but it got captured, and we actually have that footage. It was part of John's Medal of Honor upgrade.
Okay.
So you see after the SEALs say that John was presumed dead, like they thought he was dead, you literally see him and his strobe active crawl back into bunker one. And when Chris says it looks different, I say it looks different because it's obscured by the cover of that bunker and the foliage of the tree.
Right.
So it's not emitting directly like it would be if it was helmet mounted on top. It's getting dispersed or deflected in some way. So anyway, like all of those things are very, very plausible and make sense. And it was part of the overall analysis that goes into all of this. But to say it was analyzed to the nth degree is an understatement, all the way down to, the detail of the imagery that I tell you.
Yeah.
To they went as far as having, like the original medical examiner, he racks everything from most lethal to least lethal, but they didn't do a forensic approach and put them in chronology order.
Mm-hmm.
So when it was relooked at, the doctors that weren't Air Force doctors, they went back to the original medical examiner and then found another one that was a forensic expert, and those two got to confer on the case, and they went back and put the time and order to it. Now, we had a doc who was an Air Force doc that came back and explained all of their findings as part of the Medal of Honor upgrade package, but this was done just like our imagery analyst wasn't limited to just Air Force. Like there were multiple sources, there were other agencies that had looked at it. You had other doctors from a different service looking at this stuff. Like the Air Force, when somebody says go and look at your top valor awards, which is how all this started from the Secretary of the Air Force, the question came up in an article about like what does it take to win the Medal of Honor for an airman, and that resulted in an order for everybody to go back and look at your top level valor awards and make sure that we didn't overlook something.
Overlook someone, yeah.
Well, the strongest case that was out there for the Air Force was that of John Chapman. And so fortunately, they were able to piece together a lot of all of this historic footage that had originally been confiscated, but you now were able to put that back together. We'll tell that story here in a minute. anyway, when they go through and they do all of this, they've made this case essentially airtight, except it talks about leaving a man behind, and that becomes an unfortunate, uncomfortable truth for the other Navy team members. And when we're going through the upgrade process, like everybody's trying to operate on pins and needles and not throw shade at a sister service, because you know that you got to fight together tomorrow.
Right.
Like, you know, and everything in the soft community is based on relationships. So like you don't want to place blame or throw shade on somebody in that case, especially under the circumstances that they were under, intense fire. He's got multiple people shot.
God,
You know,
yeah.
like
Pure
I don't think
chaos.
anybody questions like the immediate tactical decisions that were
Agreed.
made. Like
Agreed.
it was all, you would hope that you would perform as well under
Right.
those circumstances. But, you know, like the fact of the matter is that John did not die. He was, you know, unconscious, at least, you know, for some time, but you see him get back up and crawl into that bunker. And so as this unfolds, we've called out the second strobe. We don't relay that back to MAKO, so MAKO doesn't even know that we just saw that. And the reason that happens is because now the enemy just lobbed a mortar in on the LZ, and that fire is coming close to MAKO, and so we're off to the next closest alligator to the boat. And so that moment in time passes, and it's just, you know, the fog and friction of war, and
Right.
not everything gets communicated as you would hope, and so on, whether that be from us to them or them to us. So anyway, the team breaks MAKO 3-0, the main element, breaks a little bit further distance, especially since enemy mortars are coming in. Daylight is coming. We're taking enemy fire. With our command and control that is like our boss back at Uzbekistan is ordering us to return home, because we're not supposed to fly during daylight. If we fly in daylight and you're a lumbering C-130, you're kind of a sitting duck for anybody that wants to shoot at you. And then if we lose a gunship in the midst of trying to save other people, we've just compounded matters and made it all worse, right?
Yeah.
So we this is where, you know, things can happen. We got tired of some of the command and control elements that were out there, and we conveniently shut off a radio.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, it's like, I'm sorry, you know, we're coming in broken. I can't understand you, type of deal.
Yeah. What?
Yes. So what that moment actually happened, and we had shut off one of those radios, and one of it involves something that Blaber talks about in a call sign of Champ. And then part of it is our boss that was JSOAD North, Joint Special Operations Aviation Detachment. Like that was our boss, and they were ordering us home because our rules say don't fly in daylight.
Right.
We had gone nose to tail, led by the pilot. Like, hey, everybody knows the story of Spirit 03. It was a call sign during the first Gulf War. It had stayed in daylight hours to help a ground party that was in need, and it got shot down. So, like, if you fly gunships, you know the story of Spirit 03. It happens in your formal training, and there's a schoolhouse award for the Spirit 03 award. Like, everybody knows the story. So we know about it. We check in nose to tail on call with the decision of, you know, like, stay or go, and everybody is stay.
I'm getting chills.
Yeah. So like nobody wants to leave. So we're like, okay, we're going to stay as long as we freaking can. Well, eventually command and control finds us on a radio, and they're like, get your asses home.
Yeah.
You know, like it's one of those, like you have a mission monitor, and the acronym, like military, we call it MOM.
Yeah.
Like,
Mom.
Dude, Mom's pissed.
Yeah.
Like they were mad as hell. So we have to go back. And like nobody wanted to leave them. Blaber absolutely didn't want us to leave them. MAKO didn't want us to leave them. Like, you wanted to have a positive handoff with another air asset before the gunship is going to leave. We've got Twister 5-1 flight. It's a 2-ship of F-15E Strike Eagles that are inbound, and we're passing, you know, all the pertinent information via boss man, the command and control, so we can give them last known friendly positions. We gave them both the bunker 1 position where we had presumed friendly, and the main element of MAKO, telling them like, hey, these are friendly positions, and then try to facilitate the appropriate handoff, and you're hoping that the Strike Eagles are going to get there ASAP.
Praying, yeah.
And then we're having to fly back, and it's literally broad daylight. You know, like there was a point in time where somebody was tactically trying to help us work through the situation on the radio, and the guy's like, well, can't you just figure out, like identify this or that using the IR, the TV sensor or whatever. And we're like, bro, it's daylight. And my pilot explains to him on the radio, he's like, dude, I'm wearing sunglasses.
Yeah.
So it was daylight.
Yeah.
That's as we're pulling off. So we, at this point, we don't know for certain that it's John Chapman, but we know that there was somebody that was still alive on that mountain, and not all of that is fully communicated. Okay, so we've had to leave. We're being ordered off. We're being begged to stay. It's a conflict. So as we're leaving, that's when Chappie is up on top of the mountain, and like I don't know this. I'm not there at this point, except for now we've seen all the combined footage and so on. So what you see is enemy continuing to try and engage at Bunker 1. And at one point, there's some hand-to-hand combat. And then in the end, after an hour and 15 or 20 minutes or so, the Chappie is up there by himself. The QRF comes in with the Rangers led by Captain Nate Self, and they're split between two chalks with Razor 01 and 02. 01 doesn't get all the information. Twister's been there and engaged, and then eventually some F-16s come in. But the info doesn't go to the QRF, the Quick Reaction Force, and the Rangers come right back into the X,
of course,
and they get engaged. So what's interesting about this is when you look at all of the footage, you can see where Chapman pulls himself from concealment and engages fighting positions. He engages up the mountain towards Bunker 2 and then turns to engage fighting positions. It was called Fighting Position 1 on some graphics, but they were down the slope. And he turns and he's engaging down that slope. Well, when Chapman gets killed, he gets killed by a round that comes from up and behind him, and it enters down here, lower right side of the body,
right above the right buttocks. Yeah.
Round ends up in his left shoulder.
Ooh.
And the angles match all of that. So like when I say that they forensically examined all of this, like this was the kill shot. So it took off the top of the aorta. It was like instant blood pressure loss. And so all that ties into the medical aspect. So like when we say that the Air Force went through the research to figure this out, like it's not just one source. You had what we saw as an air crew of that second strobe. You had other sensor footage that shows him up there fighting. You had all the imagery and analysis. You had the forensic medical side. You had Jay Hill on an adjacent mountain who heard MAKO 30 Charlie later come up on a radio, but they didn't have two-way comms. Jay could hear him, but Chappie couldn't hear Jay.
Yeah.
So it was like, it's, when I say it's airtight, it's airtight. Like it was holistic.
I mean, you guys went down and by how tall that individual was by standing, kneeling, what they could see, what they couldn't see.
So, and that comes into play like when Slab has the clips that says I crawled right over the top of John. Like,
right, and that's his narrative, which we can touch on next.
You didn't, but he didn't crawl over him.
Right.
So because of all of that, you ended up with these different narratives.
Right.
When all this happens, originally the SEALs aren't part of Anaconda. Their mission is to be the high value, to chase the high value targets. So they're there to go and get the most important, the Mullah Omar, the Osama bin Laden. Like if those guys show up, they're supposed to be able to go and get them. And if there's a battle and they squirt out of the area of operations, this is the team that's supposed to get on the helicopters and fly and go and take them out. So when Anaconda's going on, that's the big game. And all of a sudden you got these guys who are just waiting on this mission that may or may not unfold. And you got another one that is the big game in town, and they want in.
Because in the book they describe that of like, Blaber went to the SEALs and like, hey, would you guys want in on this? And they said no, because they were waiting for that mission.
Yep.
The possibility of catching him. And
so originally that was the case, and then later on, so Blaber had asked for help, if I recall those things, and that's not firsthand. That's as reported in the books, and so forth. But when it came time for this MAKO element coming into the battle, this was a moment where they were so close to executing Anaconda. Blaber didn't want them there, and
Right.
his words,
Right.
but he was directed, and this is where it's interesting because Blaber had done a recent interview, and it's like I had absolute respect for this man.
Yeah.
Okay? And I would have sang his praises all the way up until the point where he starts to veer off the path, and like it's like, all right, I recognize this because we battled it against the Navy when the Navy pushed their counter narrative. Their counter narrative was that John was killed initially, and they tried to paint him as an inexperienced radio man. He was new and didn't know what he was doing. All of that had been heard through the review processes. All of that was argued. The Navy had their day in court. The board members called it bullshit, and they approved, and it went all the way up, and then it landed with the SecDef, and then the Air Force sent the last officer over to brief Secretary Mattis. Mattis says, "Tell me the view of others. What's the prevailing argument?" And the officer tells the story of red on red and says that's the prevailing argument. He's like, that's what they're going with. And Secretary Mattis says, so entrenched enemy up there in close quarters, you're telling me that they're shooting each other in the face in broad daylight?
Right.
He's like, I don't buy that 1 minute.
Exactly.
Secretary Mattis said, he was a warfighter.
Yeah.
He was a Marine. He had been there. But, so none of the counter narrative held, it couldn't hold water. So eventually, Chapman's medal was approved all the way down to the fact that he survived that initial engagement and fought and risked his life for the quick reaction force. And that's eventually that's when he was killed.
Yeah.
So absolute, no doubt. Now you've got the Navy continuing to, not the Navy as a service, but vets of the Navy continuing to push what I call the counter narrative. And it's the same one that they tried to do before the medal was approved. And the medal was approved, guys. Your story wasn't believed. It's not true. You just I can't call it any other way. So when we talk about counter narrative, that's it.
Yeah.
They initially
hard.
they went so hard to confiscate all that footage, and then oh crap, we can't make Roberts the hero of the day because we know that he was dead now, and everybody knows that he was dead.
Right.
And then once you start to come out with we know that there was somebody up there fighting. Well, if that person up there fighting happens to be the Air Force Combat Controller, John Chapman, who was part of the SEAL team that broke contact, well, that doesn't look good.
Does not look good at all.
And again, nobody did it on purpose.
No.
But was he incapacitated at a moment? Yes. Did they break contact for tactical reasons? Was it legit? Yeah,
absolutely.
They did. But more than one thing can be true here.
Yeah.
And that is that, especially when you see the footage of Chapman crawling back into the bunker and the strobe, and it all matches up with everything that we're talking about, all the way down to the medical forensics. Sorry guys, you can have a counter narrative. You can control the you can be the most outspoken, non-quiet professional in the joint soft community. I'm poking at some of the SEALs. That's you see more of them out there on podcasts and doing things, and everybody else tries to be that quiet professional. Well, I say that's what they feed off of. They feed off of our quiet professionalism, and then try and seize the narrative.
Right.
So sadly, it's just their version just isn't entirely true.
Right.
And John Chapman is a bona fide freaking hero.
Oh, absolutely. And we said this time and time again, and we also mentioned that we understand what it's like to be on, we don't understand what it's like to be on that mountain. So we couldn't put ourselves in that position. Yeah. And we hit on it again with you. It's we understand shit fucking happens. It's just the fact that you lied about it. And in my point of view of what I think is they didn't know that there was probably footage of it. Right. So they probably concocted their narrative, and then that's how they stuck with for so long because
they thought they could control it by seizing the tapes. Right.
Correct.
So
it doesn't get out.
Yeah, let's tell that portion of it. So they come up and they confiscate the tapes. Well, because that was a significant mission and it involved loss of life and so forth, the footage had to be transmitted back to Department of Defense. So that footage got transmitted, and then they showed up and said, "Give me the tapes." So one of my old mentors, his name's Frank Daly. He was a tech sergeant there at Uzbekistan at the time where we were. He had the tapes from our gunship. He hand labeled them, like wrote, classified the dates and all that stuff, like his handwriting. Years later, that stuff showed up while we were in the midst of all of this. Someone in an unmarked package had sent it back to us. So the Air Force got it. And next thing you know, like Frank has a copy of his original CDs with his handwriting.
Wow.
Yeah. And so somebody wanted us to have the rest of the information, the real truth.
Yeah. I
don't know where exactly it came from. So when you mail something that could be considered classified or is, like, depends on how that I don't know on those specific tapes, but there's a way to minimize the classification of it, taking off some of the telemetry data and so forth, like the data that you would see on the screen. And if it's just raw footage, it's raw footage at that point. But anyway, I think these were classified still, but they show up. Like there's specific mailing rules. Well, normally on the outer package, you don't put anything other than the recipient address.
Right.
And on the inner package, then you put in like where it came from. Well, the people that sent this never said who sent it. Like we don't know where it came from.
Still to this day.
Yeah. Don't know. But we
thank you for sending it.
Yeah. Right. Whoever that was. Appreciate it. Now where that came in handy, when those tapes were confiscated, I told you that they had to send that to DOD. Well, after the SEALs left with the tapes, like they had come up like, slicks. Like they weren't wearing uniform. They didn't say who they were other than give me the tapes type of deal. We work with, the command.
Right.
So they showed up, they did their thing. They took the tapes. Well, the server that stuff had been transmitted on had chunked all that data and it was in like 2,000 bits. Not bits and bytes, but like 2,000 chunks. Well, after the SEALs had left and they were getting ready to move from Uzbekistan down to Bagram, that element, they were getting ready to move. This is sometime after. The NCO comes up to Frank and it's like, "Hey, that server, like all that footage that they took, like we have it. Do I need to delete it?" And Frank's like, "No, do not delete that." And so they saved it. They marked it. It got shipped, secure means. It makes it back home, and it sits in an archive at one of the units there at Hurlburt for years until this moment in time when the SecAF says, "Hey, go take a look at your Top Valor Awards."
Wow, and that was like around like 2000 and
that would have happened somewhere around 14, I believe.
14ish, yeah. And that's 12 years later.
Yeah, and so one of the imagery analysts that's involved in all of this, she was awesome. She became a chief, Jackie.
Jackie.
Shout out to Jackie. She pieced together all 2,000 chunks of this stuff and put it all back into chronological order and was able to make the tape whole again. And this is before that mysterious package of the originals showed up. So they were able to like start all of this research because they had the rest of it.
Right.
But like this didn't have everybody's footage. This was the gunship footage or and what have you. So it took other footages to get the whole picture. So anyway, that was pretty cool, and Jackie was able to piece it all back together.
It's amazing.
I don't think it was ever intended for anybody to know the whole truth, and this is where those narratives come in because, like if you look at it, Blaber says I was ordered by General Trebin, and Trebin said that the SEALs are coming in and so forth. Well, Trebin is an Air Force brigadier general. He's the deputy commanding general of the command. And so since that's a joint environment, I've known several of the DCGs over the years. I mentioned one of them was Farrell that I had mentioned before. Another one is recently retired and still a mentor of mine. Just awesome people. But an airman that's the DCG is never going to make the tactical decision on what team needs to do what or what have you. What happens is those elements brief those things to the general, and then the general makes a decision based on the course of action that that's presented. Decision brief. Well, the team that had moved in were the SEALs, and they're led by Kernan and Zemansky. Well, those are the people that forced the SEALs' hand into Anaconda.
Right.
But everybody wants to say, well, it was the Air Force General Trebin, and then you're giving the SEALs a pass. So when you look at like how MAKO even ends up on the top of Takur Ghar, it wasn't because of Ultra. It wasn't because Colonel Blaber needed them to be there. It was because they wanted to be part of the fight.
Right.
And then by them forcing their way into it,
the same guys that were supposed to be on standby for this big mission, right?
There's accounts in the books, and I'm not privy to this firsthand, but there's accounts in the books that talk about the SEALs went on a different command and control net. They were running their own line of communications. They were doing stuff not in concert with what Colonel Blaber was doing,
and leaving Blaber out,
and leaving him out of communication. And then they knew that like this AO was joint. It was conventional. It was multiple service. There were coalition. There were special forces, special operators, and then you had conventional forces as well.
Which is crazy.
Like there was a ton of intelligence out there,
Right.
and I haven't seen all the different angles, but there are people that want to trash the intel, aspects of what was known out there, and like that they were given bad intel, that the SEALs were given bad intel. Well, what I would tell you is like the intel was there. There were people that knew that mountain was occupied.
Yeah,
but those dudes
Blaber even said it was occupied.
Yeah, they didn't talk to the right people, and they forced their way in.
Right.
And the plan changed. And when Blaber had, in his own account, I think when he had left the safe house and went to the AO, like he didn't know that they were going in until they were going in. And somebody check me on that, but I thought that's what Blaber had said in one of his more recent interviews. But anyway,
well, I mean, for people
they didn't fully coordinate,
right? For people fully listening to understand, like Blaber, his part in this mission was massive. Like this guy drove all the roads himself.
Oh yeah,
and it talks about it in the book. So this guy is a wealth of knowledge. He's an asset, in the fact that he's kind of getting pushed off to the side, and then they kind of want to push the narrative of blaming that one-star general, but at the same time, it's like, well, he was cut out of communications.
Yeah.
The SEALs have been cutting him out of communications with the teams in the field too. So he was getting intel, and this is all in the book. He was getting intel from some of the teams.
Yep.
Was it MAKO?
So I was going to say this, from what I remember in the book, the way it talks about it is when MAKO 3-1, which was another SEAL team that came to AFO before they inserted, MAKO 3-1 established a line of communications directly back to their command.
Right.
And basically night one or whatever it was, they're like, hey, you dudes have to get in on this. This is like bigger than we thought.
Right.
Like you got to be in here. So that's when they started politicking to get MAKO 3-0 in there.
okay,
And decided to put him on top of a mountain that
Right.
everybody operating there said no.
Yeah, and Pete's like, you can't just insert. They have to insert like everybody else. They have to go and hike up and trek that mountain and wreck that mountain.
And that was, I mean, my understanding of, Dan Schilling's recount of it is that was the original plan. They were going to go land lower, hike in.
Right, but they had mechanical issues with the helicopters.
Yeah, they had.
Yep.
Motor went down. Night was ending. So they said, well, we've got to take this, so we're just going to land up top.
yeah.
Do we want to play any ISR footage, or do we want to move on to kind of what Blaber's statements have been recently?
ISR footage?
So
The footage of John Chapman.
Oh.
you talk about the clip from
Just
from
kind
Schilling.
of explaining any of it. Do you want to show any of that before we move on?
If the audience is familiar with it, we're talking about it. If you want to insert it,
I would say let's do this. We'll throw a link down in the bottom.
Yeah.
That
Perfect.
links you to
His-
Dan Schilling's narration of it.
It's
because-
awesome. Check it out, you
yeah,
guys, for
yeah.
sure.
yeah. So anyway, but what I'd tell people, there are people that throw spears at that particular video and say, well, this isn't the whole story. It's like, Roger, but nothing in that compilation is necessarily manipulated other than the sake of time to compress it,
Compress that,
have
yes.
a brief video that shows the totality of
Right.
specifically the actions of John Chapman.
And just like we said previously, like unless you want hours and hours of footage.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that when Dan did his book, Dan went through all the appropriate protocols, so he had unfettered access.
Right.
Like he's seen everything that was the Air Force's case for the upgrade for John's Medal of Honor. Everything.
Yeah.
So it's when you get the counter narrative stuff with the SEALs, again, it just boils down to the fact that, okay, it's an uncomfortable truth, guys. Like, sorry,
right.
But everything that they do tries to make it look like John died within the first 3 minutes. Not true, and then they try to paint him as an inexperienced radio man,
which is not true.
Like, to call a combat controller a radio man is that's an insult, to say the least.
Right.
It's horseshit.
Especially for what John Chapman did too.
Yeah. And then, like, from a deployment standpoint, like, it's understood that it was John's first deployment, but the same can be said for like specific combat for some of the members within the MAKO element. So, like, I don't think it's a valid argument to say that he was inexperienced in any way, especially when you go back and you look at the training that our Air Force Special Tactics folks do.
Yeah.
And, like, they train to the minimum standard of everybody's stuff, which makes their standard greater than all.
Right.
Like, and then, John had been embedded with those dudes, I think since like October leading up to the deployment. So it's not like he was fresh with them. Like,
no, he's been training.
He had been training with them for months.
Yeah. He knows their mannerisms. He knows how they operate. They, it's a thing. So when you go from team to team, it's different. Like, you can't just go from one SWAT team and do CQB to another SWAT team. You can, because you know the basics, but there's also a way they like to do it.
Exactly.
And there should be miscues. So,
well, and I want to say too, I could be totally wrong, but I want to say John was previously with them as well at one point.
I believe so. I am not an expert on on John's history. History.
Yeah.
So I don't want to put words out there that potentially are inaccurate.
Right.
but you're not saying carriers. That's fine.
Yeah. The wild thing is that like I love this community, but again, like, my combat control brothers that are out there, like, I don't have any of them actively taking up, this particular fight to call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
But I do have their support.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those where, like, if you look at this from this perspective, like, I don't have anything to gain from this. I just happen to be there and I speak truth. So I believe in speaking truth to power. I don't like toxic leaders. If you're in a position and you're abusing your position, like, that's pretty shitty.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's what I see going on in this case, and then they try to control the narrative. So you can look at like the Medal of Honor Museum, for example. Britt sits on the board. It was rumored that he's going to become the next president to replace Chris Cassidy. I don't know if that's true. I try not to give him much thought anymore. I was pretty deep down the rabbit hole early, but I'll never quit on the fight. So don't think that I'm ever going away, guys. But I'm not going to let it consume me. So as long as we know that the truth is out there, that the rest of the story is there, and people know that also exists, then you can go back and you can put things in perspective. You can look at the book by Matt Cold, it's Code Over Country. You want to see some of the shady stuff that some of the SEALs have done over the years. Like, it's right there.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to Matt directly. He when you talk about bringing receipts, he's got the receipts.
Oh yeah, he does.
Like, he does his homework. We did our homework. We've got the receipts when it comes to the Chapman package and the reason why he was awarded the Medal of Honor. But now you see them continue with the counter narrative.
Right.
And so whether it's abusing the positions, taking over key positions. So not just the Medal of Honor Museum and being on that board, but being president of the Congressional Medal of Honor Society. So now you can really shape and manipulate and so forth. And, like, I want to believe that all those are righteous causes, and they are, and they all have valid, mission statements and purposes and what they do.
Right.
And if you look at the Medal of Honor Museum, it's to inspire the next generation of Americans, to to carry the torch, to pick up the shield,
Right,
go and
absolutely.
do. They want to do that, but it also gives them the ability to have that platform and then be able to push out whatever information they want, even if it's not true.
True.
And like,
That's heartbreaking.
you're part of something that's super righteous. Like, why do you have to be untrue about any of it?
Right.
Like, dude, you're still a hero. You still have the Medal of Honor. You don't have to throw shade on John Chapman's legacy just because you don't want to look bad because y'all inadvertently left him behind. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, and the stuff that's going on at the Medal of Honor Museum is just ridiculous.
It's pretty wild. There's the article out there that talks about. I think it's the catering service. I think they called it Legacy something, but it's got a tie to the Jones family, and so the daughter is the head of the damn museum.
You're saying Jerry Jones?
Yeah.
Of the Cowboys.
Yes.
So his daughter.
His daughter is Charlotte, I think is who it is. You can go in and look on their website, but she was like the head of the museum. Like, he might be the president, like Chris Cassidy might be the president of it, but there's other leadership positions, and she sits above. So they ended up awarding a catering contract to a company that has according to this article that had been researched and published. Seth Atena is who it is. He's got his own podcast and his own Substack and so forth. But Seth had done this research and put it all together, and they awarded the contract to a catering company that has partial ownership of by the Joneses. And so you're head of a nonprofit, and then you just awarded a contract to your own company that you're able to pay them. And oh, by the way, you look at that article and look at what the bid was compared to the competition, and it was exponentially higher.
Oh yeah,
exponentially higher. So you look at all these things, and you could kind of start connecting the dots on who's who and what organization and why would somebody do this or that, and then things kind of start to make sense of what you're dealing with, and then it all goes back to what Matt Cole calls the brand, and he spells this out in his book, but at this point, like he would steer everything back to Tim Szymanski, and Szymanski would have been the person who was commander of Naval Special Warfare when we were going through the Medal of Honor upgrade. So he's able to, send orders down to Jeremy Williams, who's the commander of Dev Group at the time. And now he's since gone on to put on stars. And I think he's now the J3 at SOCOM. But this guy, because he's had some successes in his career, to say the least, he's a 3-star admiral.
Yeah.
He was in significant places, when some of the baddest actors against America were taken out. And so to say he's connected, to say he's got clout is an understatement.
Right.
But he's also the guy who's taken direction from Szymanski. This is, my opinion, but what I would surmise from what I experienced, Szymanski's telling him, well, in previous podcasts, I don't think we talked about him here, but George Hartwell was the intel guy for Dev Group.
Okay.
And so Jeremy Williams tasked him to research the Air Force's research.
And I believe we have that email, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
we'll throw that up for you guys.
Yeah, in there. So I got a hold of this because this is a continuation of the depths of the counter narrative. All right. So there's a fella named Mitch Hall out there. Mitch is working on his own documentary piece. And the goal is, it sounds righteous. But then I asked him the question of whether or not George Hartwell was involved in the project. And he gets evasive. Well, like those of us in this type of work, like we go through training on how to handle yourself and questioning.
Right.
So I can tell, when someone's evading the question.
Oh, absolutely.
And Mitch did. So eventually, yes, Hartwell's involved, but I was like, well, does this have anything to do with the Navy's counter narrative? I was like, because if you guys are trying to do a hit job on John Chapman and his legacy, I will have absolutely no part.
Right.
And so I did my research on him to figure out like, hey, who is this guy? What's going on? Well, I spoke to Dan, figured out that like there's an intermediary that I had gotten the emails from, but suffice it to say, Mitch had gotten a hold of this other person who's still serving. That's the reason why we don't talk about him. I don't want to bring his name out in this stuff, but he's an expert on all of this. Like he was involved. He was the Pro-Jo on the Medal of Honor package and so on. So anyway, I find out this. I received this email trail. He's like, "Hey, I'm not telling you to do it or not do it. Just do your homework. This is out there if you want to take part." I'm like, I'm not too certain. So I saw the email trail, and the email trail is George Hartwell to Colonel Pete Blaber, retired at this point, and he's trying to bend Blaber's ear. And eventually he's like, "Hey, I just want to sit down with you." And so the email basically is Blaber asking him, who is he? And, you know, like, "Hey, what's your background?" That sort of thing. So the email goes on to show George explaining what his bona fides are and so on. So he says, "Hey, I was at Dev Group at this point in time, and I was tasked to look into all of it." And it was basically, he was looking into it to see whether or not Dev Group would endorse the Chapman package. And so he basically goes down whatever rabbit holes and tries to disprove the Air Force's case.
Right.
And then ultimately it goes through a number of different boards, and like it went through the JSOC board, it went through the SOCOM board, it got all the way up to the SecDef. It was all approved. And like, I'm sorry, you tried to make a case, but you know, like it wasn't believed.
Right.
Like the evidence was overwhelming in favor of John, and that's what they did. Well, as all that stuff is unfolding, I didn't really meet him, but we were in the same room, George Hartwell, and the surviving members of MAKO 30. It was September of 2016. The research team and our initial presentation, like we were going firsthand to do a courtesy direct delivery to Captain Jeremy Williams, the commander of Dev Group, and the surviving members of MAKO. And in the room is George. And so we're briefing him and we're showing him our case and making the argument. And then you get into these moments where they're like, "Well, we were there. We were on the ground. I don't remember it that way. You can't argue with me." And then it's a moment of all due respect. I'm like, "Here's the footage. At that specific moment that you say you were there, you actually broke contact. You had terrain between you and the enemy. We were in direct contact, line of sight. And here's John crawling into the bunker.
Yeah.
And you can't refute that."
What did they say about that?
Quiet.
Yeah, exactly.
But then when Jay got up to say his piece about hearing John on the radio, these assholes had the nerve to sit there and look us all in the face and say, "You said you heard 30 Charlie? I'm pretty sure I used that on the radio." And then they turned and all looked at each other like, "You used that? Yeah, oh yeah, I used that at some point during the day too. You could have heard us." Bullshit.
So the significance of that, real quick, because if the listeners didn't see Lori's episode or anything else, so MAKO 30 is the team, right? That's the SEAL team.
Yep.
The Charlie is specifically for CCTs.
Yes.
Designated, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you hear MAKO 30 Charlie,
Yep.
that is a CCT talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be like, a team being in the field and their commander's in the field and they have a particular call sign. Well, 01 is usually the commander. It'd be like someone other than the commander using the call sign 01.
Yeah.
You don't fucking do it.
Right. Exactly.
So,
And they know that.
Yeah, it was bullshit.
Yeah, and there are things of like, we were boots on the ground, like we know exactly what happened. Like I get it, but there's also things that happen in traumatic experiences when bullets are flying at you that you go in tunnel vision, and there's things that you don't remember, and there's studies on that that's proven.
They went through another statement that they had made when we were there in person. They wanted to poke at the fact that John's gun was damaged. Well, the backstory on that was John's gun was fully functional all the way until the point that Sergeant Paulson from the QRF picked it up out of a pile of weapons. And this is Frank Daly figured all this stuff out.
This is the Rangers that the quick reaction force that came in. They got shot down.
Yeah,
they were up there for hours. They were engaged in a gunfight. They were running low on weapons, ammunition, all that stuff. So that's why he picked up that gun.
This guy had his barrel was of the same caliber of Chappie's weapon, and so he either melted a barrel, had some kind of damage.
Yeah.
Well, he had ammo for that type of weapon, so he went over into the cache of weapons that were being stored that were now like guys had been killed, and so the pile of weapons is over here. Well, he goes over and grabs one that matches his bullets and gets back in the fight.
So the weapon system was operational. There was Chappie was found with one mag, right? But it was the mag was damaged and it was inoperable. Was that correct?
No, so the mag well on the weapon is what was damaged.
That's right. Okay.
And so the case was that, well, his weapon was damaged. It couldn't have been him that was fighting up there. What happened? So Nate self-published a book, the captain of the Army Rangers. He published a book like My Two Wars or something like that. In that book, there's a statement about it's just like this fleeting thought observation, and Frank had caught it in the book, and he was complaining about seeing a ranger with one of these all kitted out rifles. It's all painted up like our special operators, and he's like, frustrated, momentary loss of discipline, or something like that.
Start shooting some ass.
I'm trying to recount it the way Frank had explained it to me, but anyway, Frank's like that he had John's weapon, and so because SEALs all had theirs, and it wasn't Fifi's, because Fifi carried a saw, and that weapon, like the barrel got bent when he fell from the helicopter. So it wasn't that. And
right.
So what he had described was the SR-25 like rifle that John was carrying or whatever. And so anyway, the story of how it got damaged, it literally, John's weapon, after he fights an hour and 20 minutes by himself, he gives his own life for the QRF coming in. John's weapon saves Paulson's life. So Paulson is at the very end, and they're loading the casualties onto the helicopter. He has the rifle slung over his back, and somebody takes a pot shot at him from behind, and it hits the mag well, and it literally saves Paulson's life.
That's why it was damaged. It wasn't damaged because
exactly.
It was that's nuts.
Yeah. So they had mentioned the damage. So we didn't know this at that point. Frank put that together between the September 16 meeting and the actual approval of the Medal of Honor. It was awarded in August of 2018, and I'm wearing a shirt for a training squadron that was named after John. There's like when you have a Medal of Honor, a number of things can get named and so forth. There's been a ship, streets. There's an annex, the training annex at Lackland Air Force Base back in Texas. There's an annex that used to be called the Medina Annex. Yeah, that's where all the special tactics training schoolhouse is, like the initial pipeline accession, where they've renamed that the Chapman Annex.
Yeah.
So
that
this
transport
shirt,
ship, it was like a munitions ship, right?
Yep,
munitions ship.
I
think so. Yeah, they I think they leased it and they named it John Chapman.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're not doing. I don't think you're going to do that amount of like honoring one person for them not to have done the actions that they did.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just another.
Yeah, it was significant. Yeah, so in addition to the weapon damage, there was also the report of like the sound of gunfire and so forth, and like they had put MAKO. It was while we were briefing, there was a moment of discussion where they're talking about like the sound of guns, and did they hear an AK or did they hear an M4 or whatever it is. And what's interesting is John's weapon was suppressed. And so like if John's firing his weapon and you hear a suppressed, especially if it's a supersonic round. You guys, talking to guys that have shot before, right?
Yeah.
So I've shot suppressed supersonic rounds. They're not whisper quiet. It's not Hollywood TV where, like the mobster comes in and it's like, no, it sounds like a freaking high-speed ricochet.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what he was shooting, but I just know that a suppressed weapon is not whisper quiet. And those guys brought up the sound of that. They absolutely, without a doubt, know that John was up there fighting.
Right.
There's no doubt in my freaking mind.
Yeah.
Because you would know the difference between the sound of an unsuppressed AK-47 versus any weapon that was suppressed.
Exactly. Yeah,
especially for dudes that are that professional when it comes to like weapons employment and shooting and everything else.
Well, I mean, shit, even if it wasn't suppressed, there's a very distinct sound difference between
100%.
AK platform and an M4.
Yeah.
Totally different sounds.
Yeah. Even, I'm not a gun expert on it, but that one was like a modified, the SR-25 is some sort of modified version of an M4 type platform.
Right.
And I think that it changes the caliber, and that's where the 7.62 comes in, if I'm not mistaken, almost like an AR-10. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what rifle he was running. But
Yeah, neither do I.
I've seen them reference the SR-25, and that's where his being suppressed and the laser and all that kind of stuff being on the weapon.
The one thing I'm just gonna end this with this. So actually, a VFW commander I know here, he was a SEAL in Vietnam, and he had talked about going up the river, and we got on a we were talking about rifles, right? The M16 and Vietnam, like all the issues they had. And something I specifically remember him talking about was the fact that anytime they would go deep into Indian country, one of the first things they would do was they would get off the boat, they would take their M16s, wrap them in ponchos, and then bury them. And then they would go and find enemy rifles. And I was like, what, was that just because like the M16 was shit or what? He goes, no, if we had to shoot somebody and you fired an M16, everybody in that jungle around you knew an American was there fighting because it sounds so different than an AK.
Yeah.
He's like, you hear AKs all the time, but an M16 firing, you're going to know. But just to describe the difference in sound and how easy it is to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys want to take a quick break before we finish up?
Sure.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, I kind of want to talk about Blaber in
let's hammer that.
the recent interview.
That's what I was looking at.
All right.
Perfect.
All right, so we hit on the narrative that's being pushed out, and one topic that Carrie and I really wanted to hit on, and I know you as well, is the Pete Blaber interview of him kind of like refuting Chapman and kind of pushing the Navy SEAL narrative in a sense. So what are your thoughts on that, and then what have you looked into?
Yeah, so I would tell you, I mean, personally, I'm surprised, but at the same time, I wasn't, because I'd had a friend who had a direct conversation with him, and so we kind of knew where he stood with stuff. But I find it somewhat ironic and quite a bit odd when you look at the title of that podcast, and the title of that podcast is like Roberts Ridge, John Chapman. And it's something along the lines of The Ground Truth featuring Pete Blaber on the Antihero.
Right.
So I looked at it, and when I watched the video, I was sickened by the overall message. Now the good part, to Pete Blaber's credit, a lot of what he said is absolutely spot on.
Right.
I would tell you there's probably 90, 95%, 100%, 90, 95% that I 100% agree with.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I already told you, like, I had a chance to work with him somewhat, like I wasn't like in his unit or anything like that, but like we crossed paths. And he left a very positive, memory on me. When I saw this, I'm like, damn it, man. Like, you even have these principles outlined in your book, and you're completely veering from your own mantra.
Right.
Yeah. And specifically listen to the boots on the ground. So when I listened to that interview, like one of the first things that I was taken back by, he's got a statement in there that says, like where the title, The Mission, The Men and Me comes from, and says flat out, I'm not going to compromise my integrity. And I'm like, okay. Well, from a people standpoint, like I make mistakes all the time. We talked about, like, at one point we were talking about narcissists and some of the habits that they have, and it tends to be the playbook of, deny everything, deny everything, demand proof, and immediately make counter accusations. So when things don't go according to plan. It's kind of interesting to see how the Navy, the SEAL community specifically, has a tendency to kind of change the narrative.
Right.
Something that was a big mess up is now turned into a big success story, or accidentally leaving a man behind. You thought he was dead, but like shit, he wasn't. And now all of a sudden we need to go through and try and change the narrative, and they're going to get out in front, even though we know that it was all reviewed. The case was airtight. All of the review boards went, and the Medal of Honor was approved for all of the citation that was John Chapman's. And now we're going to come out and take these platforms with the Medal of Honor Museum and those societies and other nonprofits, and we're going to push out the narrative that says that he was killed in the first 3 minutes. Come on, dude.
Right.
Well, Blaber went on the Anti-Hero, and he's saying the same things that run consistent with the Navy's counter narrative. And so, like, when you look at, they titled this "The Ground Truth" featuring Pete Blaber. Well, you just connected yourself to Mitch Hall in that documentary that he's trying to push. And again, like, if Mitch goes and does this, if he brings everybody, to the forefront, and they are able to like rehash what all happened, like, that's awesome. But the Air Force folks that were involved won't touch him with a 10-foot pole because of how evasive and weird things were getting. Like, all we wanted him to do was go through public affairs. Well, he refused to go through public affairs because he wanted to remain, independent and have creative license and not be told like what he could or couldn't say in there.
Right.
And so, and I told him flat out, I won't be a part of anything that takes a hit on Chapman's legacy.
Right.
It's like, I will not. And so you look at what there's some stuff that they've pushed out, little clips and snippets. They've done work, and they've done some goodness probably of bringing people that otherwise hadn't talked about the mission. But I know that there's also an axe to grind, and there's a little bit of, you're going to have to take some of this with a grain of salt, because these guys are pushing the same counter narrative that they tried to push to try and squash John's Medal of Honor package. And that was the inexperienced radio man, the fact that he didn't know what he was doing, like, what the hell? Like, couldn't be further from the truth. So let me hit a couple of points that I saw. So he says, I'm not going to compromise my integrity. Well, like I said, I make mistakes. Blaber can make mistakes. One of the first things he talks about when he gets into the actual events of Anaconda, he's talking about a ZSU. It's a anti-aircraft artillery piece. They're 23 caliber, and there's multiple variants of this thing. Well, he refers to this gun, and he shows a picture of it, and he says it's a ZSU 23-4. Well, it's not. It's a 23 of a different model. I think, if I remember the picture correctly, I think it was a 23-2. I think it was a 2-barrel one. But they also have a single barrel, 23 millimeter. Anyway, a ZSU 23-4 is a 4-barreled 23 millimeter anti-aircraft artillery piece that's actually mounted to a mechanized piece of equipment. Like, it's got tank tracks, can move. Anyway, Blaber is as fallible as any of us are. We're all human.
Right. Absolutely.
So take what he said in his interview with a grain of salt. And specifically, we talked on, he blames General Trevin. Well, I would tell you, an Air Force Deputy Commanding General does not make the tactical calls of what ground force does what actions on the battlefield.
Right.
Those commanders elevate that. There are courses of action that are presented, and then ultimately a commanding general will make a decision. So who was in the ear of General Trevin that Blaber doesn't want to talk about? And that was Commander Kernan and Tim Zemansky. So, like, that's who pushed the SEALs to get into the middle of all of that, when Blaber is on the record in multiple books and other interviews that they weren't part of it, and he didn't need them at that point in time. So like, that's contradictory. He talks about their ops guy who was sent forward. Well, in that interview, he doesn't name him because it's Vic Hyder, and Vic Hyder is associated with some pretty shady stuff. So he purposely leaves out the names of Zemansky and Kernan when it comes to who influenced Trevin, but he'll say General Trevin, is the one to blame.
Right.
Like, sorry. And
Right.
then he doesn't mention Vic Hyder because you know that there's going to be bad press the moment Vic Hyder's name gets brought up. There was a moment about there was a conversation between Blaber and Slab, and Slab says, "I'm ordered," but doesn't push back, and it was on the infill. Okay, and so Blaber was like, you don't need to do this, and this is where there's a interesting conversation that goes down, and it ends up being that Slab's on the horn with some of his blue leadership, and Blaber says that a junior officer made a bad call, but that was actually Zemansky. He's saying that the junior officer, I think, was Vic Hyder, and what I'm saying is that the way I understand this, there was actually a conversation between Zemansky and Slab, and that's where that quote of "you're a goddamn frogman" comes in. Basically, you're going to get on that mountain.
Right. Do your job.
Yeah. So Zemansky pushed all this stuff, and then when he did, when everything went wrong, that's the reason why they wanted to cover everything up. So squash the videos, control the narrative, and it is what it is. We'll just decorate them and move on.
Right.
So when there's what I say inaccurate or inconsistent statement about how Roberts fell out of the helo, the Razor 03 crew debrief with Intel, Frank Daly was part of it, stated that Roberts was actually helping a ramp crew chief that had fallen out but was hanging by the gunner's belt when Roberts fell out onto the LZ. And so there's recounts of some of this stuff, and I honestly, I don't know what the real truth is on that one, but if that immediate debrief happened with Intel, I would tell you that's probably the best source.
Right.
So I believe that when Roberts fell, it was because he was helping the gunner that Alan Mack describes was dangling up underneath the helicopter.
Right. Because that's what the aircrew said after the debrief, correct?
Yeah. There's a moment where Blaber reports telling Slab to land offset and use the AC-130 to gain ground, recce by fire, etc. And I'm like, yep, that was the plan. That's what we were trying to get them to do.
Right.
And then we already showed that clip where he says there's no other place to land, according to Alan. And he also says that Alan flew him in on Razor 04, but Alan says that was Jethro. So, there's mistakes in here.
So,
right?
Quick question on that one. So, you guys were under the impression you guys lazed a location.
Yeah.
Blaber was saying, "Hey, this is what we're going to do." You guys were both on the same page. Did they acknowledge whatsoever Britt Slabinski? Did he acknowledge that whatsoever? Hey, I acknowledge. I hear your transmission, or is there
no?
anything
So
like that?
this in Blaber's discussion, I think that was Blaber and Slab having a private conversation.
Okay.
We weren't privy to that particular conversation. I don't believe.
But that was your game plan for them to land, not on the X, but lazed in.
Yeah, we definitely didn't want them to be right on the X. We wanted them to get on the ground and then talk us on. And again, I think he just made the tactical decision from an expediency standpoint.
Yeah.
And I don't second guess that. Did he make the right call?
Right.
It's his to make.
My thing is the counter argument of well, maybe they didn't get the transmission, right?
No,
I don't know if he received that transmission.
No,
or heard that transmission.
When a helicopter's coming in and we're identifying, we basically sparkle the target. So it's a laser flashlight that's going bing, bing, bing.
Mm-hmm.
You're to land right here.
Yeah.
And they literally flew right through it and went where they wanted to.
So that's standard operation procedures. You guys lit up the LZ for them.
Yeah, no, the helicopter
So they
pilots
should have
knew.
known.
They
Okay.
were following the guidance that,
Got it.
that
Makes
the
sense.
team leader.
I just want for everyone else to understand that.
He was Blaber was the ground force commander for Ultra 01. He was that for his guys, right?
Yeah.
Well, technically for the MAKO, the ground force commander is Britt Slabinski. He's the team leader,
Right.
So he makes the tactical decision. He tells the helicopter pilot where he wants
This
to
is what
go.
he wants. Yeah.
Yeah. Did Mac give him information that there wasn't another LZ? Perhaps.
Yeah.
But he knows that there were other landing. He had
Areas.
other options.
Correct.
It was just going to be the tyranny of distance and then fighting uphill, and therefore it would have delayed them being able to get to Roberts.
Right.
So anyway, we were all caught off guard. I would agree with Blaber's statement on telling Slab how to do that and use the gunship to his tactical advantage. We already talked about the piece where Chappie left his larger radio, the PRC.
Yep.
He left that behind, and that was like, they don't talk about this in Blaber's interview. They just said that Chappie leaves his PRC and goes embidder only, which is a smaller handheld radio. But that was the team leader's decision. Like, he ordered everybody to go light. And so there's places where that's already been captured in Brits on words. But in this interview, Blaber skips right over that. Tell you, Blaber blames the deputy commanding general for telling Blaber's deputy to stay off the net. So that one, yeah, this is absolutely true, and it sucked because the guy that he's talking about in that interview, like, he knew what was going on. He had SA, and then all of a sudden, situational awareness. Okay. All of a sudden, Trevin came on the net and said something to the effect of, "We don't need you getting all emotional," or whatever.
Yeah.
And he basically kicked the guy off the net, in effect. And like 100%, that was true. And I think at the time, Jimmy was sitting in the talk with 10th Mountain, and those were the guys that were the other conventional forces that were part of Anaconda. Right. They had good SA on what was going on.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So
did.
Blaber, being a smart freaking ground force commander, he had his guy parked in with those guys so that he could have
communication.
Same as, basically he would know what they knew.
Yep.
By having his guy embedded as a liaison, right?
Yeah, smart.
So again, I give all kinds of credit to Pete Blaber, but
absolutely.
Except for some of these,
it's just some of the facts that he said.
Some of these things from
it just doesn't make
the
sense
counter narrative,
right?
Yep. So, all the SATCOMs, all the satellite communications are that they play in that interview are off of Grim-33's aircraft, not ours. And so Grim-33 was the sister gunship that was up there. So they make a big deal about a lot of the audio that they were playing, but it wasn't necessarily the same crew that had direct comms with MAKO. That was us. So I just found it odd. I've highlighted here all the satellite radio communications that they played on that interview were from Grim-33 aircraft that was orbiting over the Razor 03 crash site. They weren't directly overhead Takur Ghar. That was us, Grim-32. And Blaber makes a comment about Slab being seasoned and Chappie being a brand new guy. And like, I think that's horseshit.
Right.
It might have been his first, deployment.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we've talked about the amount of training that they go through. And oh, by the way, he had been training with the MAKO guys since like October before that deployment.
Right.
So I think it's bullshit. Anyway, but Blaber assesses that Chappie went up the mountain based on Champ was a call sign. He was like one of the fire control officers, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
He would have been on like the fires net or what have you. But Champ, they were making a big deal about how Champ is saying the word assault, 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 and somehow or another that influenced John's actions on the objective.
I do remember hearing that, yeah.
And I would tell you that there were moments where we heard stupidity on the radio that night, and we were literally shutting those people off. And the people that we wanted to listen to were Ultra 01 and MAKO 30.
Right.
Like
the only ones
everybody,
that
they were the only ones that mattered to us.
Yeah.
Everybody else was just kind of inducing fog or friction into the matter. And that's war. It's
absolutely
when you deal with a complex operation. Anyway, when he assesses that Chappie went up the mountain based on Champ's repeated assault statements, Slab is on record in a number of interviews saying that he briefed the team himself on the plan, like directly. All eyes on me. He says this in a number of interviews.
Yeah, I remember that.
So like he's repeatedly interviewed, even says things like eyes right here, all eyes on me, the line forms here, etc. So he's making sure that his team knows what the plan is. And, when to say that Chappie went off on his own is bullshit. So Chappie did what the plan was briefed,
yeah.
And he was told to go take the high ground and establish comms. Well, it just so happened that taking the high ground was running right towards the enemy.
Do you have that video? Of
Brit saying things like what the plan was.
And, you had mentioned he said like in interviews like I told those guys.
Yeah, it's in that drive.
All right, cool. We'll drop that in right here.
Yeah, perfect.
On the top of the mountain.
I know I know now, I know my guys are, I know they're scared, but I got to tell them what's going on. So I tell them we're going back. I give them everything I know. I'm giving them the why of what we're doing. I give them all that stuff, and I turn to them all, and I tell them, this is a time, you got to stand up, and the line forms right here, right?
Oh, you're still on the ground at this point?
Yeah, we're still on the ground.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry.
I'm just going to, connect it all up here. So we're still on the ground. I just tell them, hey, eyes on me, focus on me, 100% of you here right now. This is what we're doing. We're going to go back. So we lift off, we go, and we land up there, taking heavy fire right away, because now everybody's awake. They know we're there, taking heavy fire.
Let's see. What's the next good nugget here? Yeah. So Slab says that he told Chappie to take the high ground and establish comms. Is my my statement, and I just took a note in the camera. Blaber, like his hand is shaking quite a bit when he's making this statement about Chapman and the repeated assaults and like this narrative. And it was just kind of weird. Like if somebody had a tell, I just noticed that his hand was shaking a lot during
Weird
that
body
particular
language,
point.
yeah.
It's around the 2.5 hour mark. I've got it timestamped at 2:29:45. But
Okay.
anyway, it's pretty interesting in that video, especially if you're reading body language. All right, so at 2 hours and 33 minutes into this interview is the piece that really pissed me off. Blaber says that Slab asked Chappie on the objective, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Yeah, this
and
is a
says
big
that
one.
Chappie replied, "I don't know." So they're trying to paint Chappie like he was being an idiot.
Right.
When you can go back and look at the Slab interview, Slab in the official Navy recount says, "I went up to John and I say, 'Hey John, what do you got?'"
Yeah.
And John's response was, "I don't know."
And
And
he-
that was as they're looking up they're looking around the area. It's like, "What do you got?" "I don't know." As he's looking, and then enemy fire erupts from bunker 1. So there's a little bit of recount on what was the enemy firing at? Were they shooting at the helicopter or were they shooting it at the team?
Right.
Well, it was effective enough for John to ambush the attacker.
Yeah.
To
Take
attack
action,
the attacker, right? So anyway, like this is probably the most blatant lie that's in there. And Slab is right here saying, I say, "Hey John, what do you got?"
Can you pull that up?
Got up off that.
Yeah.
I was down, I ran off the ramp. As soon as I got off the ramp, the snow was much deeper on top than I thought. So my first step off the ramp, first one off, first step, I took a tumble, much like if you've ever been in snow and you step off your steps, right? You think that next step is there and it's not, and you take a fall. I took a header right off the end of the plane, and got up off of that, wiped the snow from my face, and joined my guys, and walked up next to one of my teammates, John, and I asked John, I said, "John, what do you have?" He said, I don't know. And then right away we started taking heavy fire from a bunker that was right in front of us. Dug in position underneath a tree, had a tarp, and a heavy sustained machine gun fire coming out of there. That gunfire came right at us.
Yeah, I just have this marked as total BS. Slab reports asking him, "What do you have?" Chappie's response was, "I don't know." Before this, Blaber talks about the Schilling narration, stating they're under fire, and says that the team wasn't, and that the enemy was shooting at the helo, and then nothing for 15 seconds, and then more fire erupts. Schilling's comments in his narration are about the firing at the team from multiple directions, and those are related to what happens after that brief pause in enemy gunfire when the helo departs. So there was initial enemy fire towards the helicopter, and then the helicopter has flown off, where the team is still somewhat consolidated in that wagon wheel, and then there's a pause, and then enemy fire erupts on them.
Right.
So, like, I just think it's a little bit of, convenient trying to say that they weren't even being shot at, and then, here goes Chapman just running towards the enemy. Like, what is he doing? And they're trying to depict him like he's not doing what was tactically sound, and I just think that's a lie. It's bullshit.
I agree with you.
There's some minor stuff where he starts splitting hairs over the terminology of Bunker 1. And I would just tell you that like everybody referred to them as bunkers from the very beginning. He makes a statement of it's not a bunker. It was a cooking area. I was like, well, it might have been a cooking area,
Was it dug out?
But they shot from it,
Right,
and it was dug out.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I mean,
anyway, it just seems silly. And then, his assessment of the being there on the ground is after that damn thing was hit with a hellfire. So like, it's not necessarily the same as it was.
right.
So anyway, this is where I get back into the whole, listen to the boots on the ground. Like, well, if you were there 3 to 4 days after, did you have boots on the ground? Absolutely.
Right.
But you weren't there in the moment. You were, separated from line of sight. You didn't always have radio comms with him. You definitely didn't see what was going on the mountain. And now he's piecing together all of this stuff, and he comes out and he hits a large platform, and then lo and behold, key nuggets happen to be the same as the Navy counter narrative, and those guys are involved in the Mitch Hall documentary or whatever
I'm
he's
not
trying to do.
surprised whatsoever.
So,
I'm not surprised. And to the fact that, we're talking about boots on the ground. Like, yes, the guys that were physical boots on the ground, which was the Navy SEAL, the MAKO team that was there,
yeah,
100% they were. But at the same time, they weren't there for a portion of it. And then it's already proven that they did not check Chapman. Physically was not checked, and then left him. So there's no more physical boots on the ground. But you guys had that overhead, that bird's eye view, and never lost. You never lost visuals of John Chapman. You guys watched the strobe. You guys followed the strobe into the bunker or the cooking area, quote unquote.
yeah. There's a moment around 2 hours and 49 minutes where Blaber's walking through a slideshow. Like, it's all pre-prepared, exactly what he was pushing out. And I think it's, since it was Ground Truth featuring Pete Blaber, I think it's tied in with the information that the Ground Truth folks had put together. But there's a moment there. He's talking through, it's like slide 20, and the timestamp is from 4:57 to 5:11 a.m. And at the end of that slide, Blaber says Chappie's still alive. And I don't know if he meant to say that, because that runs in contradiction to the Navy's counter narrative of he died in the first 3 minutes. So
What happened?
yeah. The audience just needs to understand that there are inconsistencies when it comes to the counter narrative aspect. It's no different than if you try to go and Google, Slab and look at the evolution of interviews and how the story is somewhat morphed. Similar to, initially he says that he saw the rise and fall of the laser on John's chest, and then it stopped rising and falling. So that was saying that he had stopped breathing. Till later on when he said that he crawled right over the top of John.
Right.
Like, without a shadow of a doubt, he was dead. Like, sorry, dude. Like, the footage shows where you crawled, and you didn't crawl over John. The closest person you crawled over was Neil Roberts, and you guys all said that you never even saw Neil when you went up there.
Yeah.
You were literally right next to him.
Unless he thought Roberts was Chapman. But he said he looked at Chapman at the tree, and he said he saw the rise and fall of the laser, and then when he looked back, it was gone. So there's no way he could have mixed up Neil Roberts with...
that's what happens when you start weaving a web of lies. Right?
You can't keep it straight.
Yeah. Anyway.
It's consistency. And if someone's telling the truth, they're going to tell the same story over and over and over and over again. There's not going to be wishy-washy.
Then they get into the whole red on red theory, and he starts talking about the enemy fighter up there known as Redbeard.
Yes.
And there's a point where Blaber's explaining Redbeard and Enemy 2 between 5:50 and 5:56 a.m. And he says Redbeard moves across the open, and then Enemy 2 fires an RPG at Bunker 1. And I'm saying if Chappie's dead and there's no one there, then why is the enemy going after Bunker 1?
Right.
Everything's supposed to be red on red, but I thought that their red on red was that Redbeard was engaging, the other guys. Well, these were two of the assailants that were trying to get after John.
Yeah.
And so like we went through all of this. We identified, through the IR signature who was who in the zoo, and then you had, a chain of custody based on those signatures, because you knew that this person's heat was different than that person's heat. And then when a fighter is killed, they were even able to, figure out like when the heat signature starts to degrade because of the cooling of the body
Right.
and the snow.
Oh yeah, and
that
that's
sort
going
of
to
thing.
replicate. Yeah.
It was thorough analysis.
Right.
So anyway, these guys are just kind of continuing to push the same counter narrative that wasn't believed the first time.
But then you
So,
also talk about the the strobes, right? Like
Yeah.
you guys saw Robert's strobe, and then it was extinguished, and then you saw another strobe, and then that same strobe was still attached to Chappie's body, and along with all of his equipment. So his body was not even touched.
yeah, we called it. The official statement was he was neither molested nor defiled. He was found with all of his gear. John Chapman was.
So there you go. There's no Afghani running around with a strobe.
Mm-mm. Nope. There's a critique on the Department of the Air Force produced video, and it makes an assumption that the analysis might not have looked at the entire footage, and I'm just like, that's not the case at all. We looked at everything.
Right. I mean, you guys literally took the extra step in measuring
Yeah.
every single little inch of that mountainside.
I think those are all the key points, but again, like Blaber, he summarizes about the disconnected chain of command, and I couldn't and how that gets people killed, and I couldn't
Agree more.
couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
But again, like he's absolved all the SEAL leadership, like they refer to it as blue leadership. At the time, that was one of the slang things that they would have been referenced as. But anyway, he doesn't mention them by name. He gives them a pass, blames Trebin, and
They scapegoat.
and never names Dick
Yeah.
Hyder, and continues to parrot the same counter narrative that George Hartwell helped cook up on behalf of Dev Group in order to try and squash Chapman's metal upgrade.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't get
Really
it.
messed up.
I don't get it. It just, and I mean, even like during that podcast, like it was just nothing was refuted. It was just pushed on. So
Yeah, well, we have our own opinions on that
no,
podcast.
100%.
Yeah, I reached out to Brent and Tyler, and I asked him, I was like, hey, you give me a chance to refute some of what he said. You know that I have respect for the man, and in most of what he says, I would agree with.
Mhm.
But there's a few nuanced details that happen to be consistent with the Navy's counter narrative
Right.
that are bogus. And I just like, you be a podcaster, you can be a journalist or whatever, but you have a level of responsibility to maintain integrity. And it's not like Brent and Tyler don't know about the other viewpoints. Hell, I had already interviewed with them.
Right.
And they've interviewed a number of people on it. I wasn't the first. But then to have a guest on and allow that to go completely unchecked when you know that it runs counter to videos that you've already put out with other guests.
Right. Yeah, brother.
I don't know why. So initially I finally got a text response back from Tyler. He was going to get back to me after they had a meeting or whatever. And then he just went cold after that.
Yeah.
So I kind of expected them to at least give an opportunity to at least, refute it, address it somehow. But
I would
they
say-
just skipped it and moved on.
Follow the money trail.
No.
That's what I'm saying.
I wish I was, I had a little bit more access because I think a little forensic accounting could go a long way with some of these cats.
Oh, yeah.
Be pretty interesting. IRS, are you listening?
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Might be another podcast for another day, boys. But before we take off, brother, is there anything else you want to touch on before, we had that end the podcast episode?
No, nothing other than a huge thank you to you guys. I appreciate the hospitality.
Absolutely, brother.
Bringing me out. It's been a pleasure. I enjoy the weather, that's for sure.
Beautiful out right now.
A little bit cooler than from where I'm coming. So-
I've actually been bitching about how cool it's been.
No, I'm loving it. I'm loving
I'm
it.
excited.
Yeah,
It's
you
supposed to
guys
get
are-
back in the 80s here.
Y'all have been great hosts. It's just, it's funny. I think this goes for anybody that's in that military first responder type. Like, there's such an interconnectedness. Like you might have just met somebody, but you instantly have common ground.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it's like you've known each other all your life. brothers from another mother. What can I say?
Oh, dude, honestly, the honor is truly all ours, and you've been phenomenal yourself. You're extremely fucking articulate, brother. You were squared away. You have the receipts, but not even just that. You are genuinely a good person. I appreciate your leadership skill set. And actually, one thing I do want you to tell before you do leave is one thing I want you to tell the audience is the leadership story you told me.
You talking about do you apologize?
Not the apology, but you apologize, but it was with your guys. You're trying to guess. So that story, I think, speaks volumes about who you are as a person and as a leader.
Sure. So real quick, we were talking about the fellow that's involved. Shout out to Felix. He had grown up from being a staff sergeant in this particular example, and now he's an Air Force Chief Master Sergeant. Huge props to you, Felix. But he helped bring to my attention something that had helped him along the way. And it was a moment where I showed humility and I apologized.
Yeah.
And I was catching flack from a pretty toxic leader in the organization. The guys were behind. I was one of the senior enlisted leaders, and they were behind on some reports and so forth. And I said, okay, I warned you guys, I needed all this stuff in, and it needed to be quality, not junk. So you can't just speed through and give me a shitty product that is never going to, cut the mustard. So I called them all in on a Saturday. And Felix says, he comes up to me on the side. He's like, I understand your intent, senior. He's like, but I did all of mine and we did it well. He's like, do I have to come in? And I said, yeah, for the sake of, everybody. I was like, I need you to come in. And then I went and I looked at what he had given me. It was towards the end of the day, so he was out the door. But I had stayed a little bit later, and I looked at it before I left, and I was like, son of a gun. I was like, his product does not suck. He did exactly what he said. I was like, I'm going to use this as a positive example. So that next morning, everybody comes in. They arrive on time, just like I'd asked them to, and I say, hey, before we get started, I need to come clean about something. I was like, Sergeant Martinez, I was like, you asked me about, and I told them what had happened. I was like, so I want to take this moment to thank you and apologize to you because I looked at your products right afterwards. Everything was squared away. So you, sir, are free to go. I apologize for having you come in this morning. And anyway, it's something as simple as that. That event, like I totally forgot about it. Didn't think anything of it. It was just being genuine. And then as he was progressing through the ranks, we were having conversations, and he didn't make chief, one particular iteration, and I was like, keep your head down, take care, like everything's going to work out. And then anyway, he recounted that story, and it was one that I was appreciative of. It was always nice to see a positive impact that you can have on somebody.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. I mean, that speaks volumes. It really does.
So
I can agree, man.
As you could hear my dog freaking out right now.
It's because he misses me. He's ready for more belly rubs.
You guys were best friends last night for sure. But we appreciate you guys coming in and tuning in to Beyond the Dispatch. This was a really good episode. Look into it, you guys. This is a wrong that needs to be righted. And if someone was to, Rob, I guess this is a question for you, brother, but like if someone was to want, take a next step further, what would they do to be able to do that?
In regards of
trying to make a difference for like this John Chapman story.
Oh man, like what I would encourage is like there are people in the community of the SEALs that know the difference between right and wrong, and they know where the truth and the mistruths are.
Yeah.
If Mitch Hall wants to paint, the Air Force as revisionist history people, like, dude, that's narcissist playbook 101. Like, you just denied everything, demanded proof, and immediately made counter accusations on the thing that you're freaking doing.
Yeah.
So don't tell me, that that someone else is trying to change the history.
Right.
Like, you guys are. So if there's another step, like, I just encourage folks that are in the know to speak truth to power. And if you don't ever freaking stand up to them, they're always going to be in control of your life.
Exactly. Well, again, you guys, we appreciate you tuning in to another episode of Beyond the Dispatch. Please do us a favor, like, subscribe, share. We can't do without you guys, and we'll catch you on the next one. Kerry, do you have anything?
Thanks, guys.